Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed.
Members, having been given notice by the First Minister and Deputy First Minister under Standing Order 11, I have summoned the Assembly to meet today for the purpose of debating a motion on the trade and cooperation agreement with the EU. Clerk, please read the motion.
That this Assembly takes note of the trade and cooperation agreement between the United Kingdom and the European Union.
Thank you, and I call the First Minister to move a motion. First Minister.
I beg to move.
Thank you. And the Business Committee has agreed to allow up to 2 hours for this debate. You will have, well, actually 3 hours. I have to correct that. So we'll have 3 hours for this debate in total. You will have 10 minutes to propose the motion and 10 minutes to wind. 4 amendments have been selected and are published on the marshal list. The Assembly should note that all of the amendments are mutually exclusive, so if an amendment is made, the question will not be put on any subsequent amendments. For example, if amendment number 1 is made, the question will not be put on amendments 2, 3 or 4. If amendment number 1 is not made, I will put the question on amendment 2 and so on. In accordance with the flexibility given to me by the Business Committee, an additional hour has been added to the total time for this debate. That's for 3 hours. I call the First Minister to open the debate on the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as members will be aware, the United Kingdom and the European Union have reached agreement on the terms of their future relationship. The text is extensive and will require careful legal scrutiny by our policy officials and legal advisers over the coming days and weeks. And to paraphrase Winston Churchill, it's not the beginning of the end, but rather the end of the beginning. Members, we formally left the European Union on the 31st of January of this year, but the transition period will formally end at 11 p.m. on the 31st of December. The EU Future Relationship Bill, enabling the United Kingdom Government to ratify and implement the agreement, was published yesterday and introduced into Parliament today. This provides limited time for the Executive and the Assembly to fully scrutinise the implications of the agreement and the proposed bill. And whilst that is regrettable, as an Executive we felt that it was important that the Assembly had the opportunity to have their say on what has been agreed, and that is the purpose of today's debate. Members will be well aware that for various reasons all parties in the Executive have held different views both on the decision to leave the European Union and on the impacts and potential benefits that this decision will inevitably bring. Whilst acknowledging those differences, however, it is equally important to recognise that, as with members in this chamber, we have been unified in our commitment to securing the best possible outcome for our communities, businesses and citizens. In that regard, we have been clear in our engagement both with the United Kingdom Government and the European Union that this can be best achieved through a comprehensive future relationship agreement, an agreement which minimises the impact on our society, businesses and economy and allows Northern Ireland to prosper. Both the UK and the EU have heralded the agreement as an unprecedented zero-tariff, zero-quota deal. However, it is much wider than a trade agreement, covering a wide range of areas from transport to security. However, for all businesses trading between the United Kingdom and the European Union, there will be significant changes. For Northern Ireland, there is the added complexity of the interaction between the agreement and the protocol, with the joint committee decisions on the protocol only agreed formally on the 17th of December. While providing clarity, the lateness of both the agreement and of the joint committee decisions on the protocol, it does present an enormous challenge for our businesses and society in preparing for the end of the transition period. There are many challenges that lie ahead in rebuilding our economy following the events of this past year, and we recognise the different sensitivities across this House and our communities. The challenge and the opportunity is great. We can acknowledge that there are fundamental differences across the parties in the Executive and members here today, and that this chamber must fulfil its obligations in challenging and scrutinising the Executive. However, ultimately our focus must be on working together to support our businesses and communities. Since January, we have faced significant challenges in both Brexit and in managing the COVID pandemic. And in that respect, Mr. Speaker, let me acknowledge the wonderful news this morning of the approval of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, a tremendous testament to the world-class strength and brilliance of our United Kingdom scientists, which means our wider vaccination programme will roll out across Northern Ireland next week. Our priority for Brexit in the Executive was to ensure that the needs of Northern Ireland were understood and reflected in the future relationship with the EU. This was particularly important given that we are the only region of the UK which will have a land border with the European Union. While it will take time to fully scrutinise the agreement, our focus will be on the degree to which it addresses our concerns and how we influence implementation to fully reflect our unique circumstances. At this point, I want to focus on a few aspects of the agreement which are particularly important. Firstly, on trade. The agreement is for a zero-tariff, zero-quota deal on qualifying goods, which goes beyond any trade deals that the EU have previously agreed with third countries. However, whether a good will qualify will depend on rules of origin and the significant detail that is set out in the annexes to the agreement. This will require detailed scrutiny for the impact on our local industries and economy, and an assessment will also be required on the interaction between what has been agreed in relation to trade and the application of Article 5 of the Protocol on goods at risk moving into the EU single market. On transport, the agreement appears to provide greater recognition of the unique position regarding transport here. Similarly, on justice and security, it is welcome that the deal preserves operational capability on law enforcement and criminal justice, most importantly with the Republic of Ireland. Key measures enabling the continued exchange of criminal records and sharing of DNA, fingerprints, vehicle data and passenger details are crucial to ensure operational effectiveness and public safety. It is also welcome that the agreement provides for effective extradition arrangements and enables bilateral cooperation between Member States. Mr. Speaker, this is a complex agreement and implementation will be a challenge and will need to be carefully monitored to ensure that no unintended consequences occur. We have experienced at first hand the benefit of our involvement in the Withdrawal Agreement Joint Committee and not of our officials in the Specialised Committee, and it will be essential that we are represented in the governance structures of both agreements as we move forward, and we will be pressing the United Kingdom Government for this level of access, and I have already raised the issue with them as late as yesterday. This is the start of a new era in the relationship between the United Kingdom and the EU, and in Northern Ireland we will want to maximise the opportunities the new arrangements provide for our local economy. We need to be prepared to work together to advance the interests of Northern Ireland in this new relationship, irrespective of our political views. Mr. Speaker, I do want to make a few comments as DUP leader. As part of our consideration of the deal, we in the party are mindful of the fact that Northern Ireland will operate in line with the protocol imposed upon Northern Ireland, a protocol brought about by the skewed view of the interpretation of the Belfast Agreement. We have consistently opposed the protocol and voted against it in the House of Commons. We warned both the May and Johnson governments about treading this path, but sadly they have decided to impose it on the people of Northern Ireland. I note some of the commentary of those unionists and architects of the Belfast Agreement who continue to peddle untruths about October 2019. The outline deal of the 2nd of October, of course, did not propose an all-Ireland regulatory zone with Irish sea checks. The key element of the 2nd of October deal was the consent protection. Divergence from the rest of the United Kingdom on standards and SPS could only happen. No, I want to finish the speech. The SPS could only happen if there was a cross-community vote in the Northern Ireland Assembly. The consent protection was removed, and therefore we could not support such an approach, as it would risk divergence from the rest of the United Kingdom. That was made clear immediately and is a matter of public record. Those are the actual facts, Mr. Speaker, as opposed to the alternative version that we have heard peddled recently. Our guiding principle throughout the period of exit negotiations has been that Northern Ireland's place within the internal market of the United Kingdom must not be undermined, and Northern Ireland must continue to enjoy unfettered access both to and from Great Britain. Whilst we accept this agreement does bring about zero tariff and quota arrangements between the United Kingdom and the EU, thus removing many goods from attracting tariffs between GB and Northern Ireland, the fact remains that this agreement does not assist Northern Ireland in the context of having to operate under the Northern Ireland Protocol. So, in another place today, my parliamentary colleagues will vote against this agreement. And to be clear, we do so on a point of principle and not because we supported a no-deal option. A free trade deal is better than no deal, but for Northern Ireland, this deal does not undo the detrimental aspects of the protocol. Understandably, many in Great Britain will be able to support these agreements today as applied to Great Britain, but sadly for Northern Ireland, we will be governed by the arrangements in the protocol. While Northern Ireland will remain in the United Kingdom's customs territory and we are out of the Common Agricultural Policy and the Common Fisheries Policy, we will be aligned with the EU for manufactured goods, for food and animal products alongside other EU-imposed restraints. The removal of the so-called cliff edge on the 1st of January will be welcome, but more work will be required to ensure that we can maintain free-flowing business supply lines from Great Britain into Northern Ireland. And to that end, we will continue to work with the Government to mitigate against those damaging practical outcomes flowing from the protocol. And we have been engaged in that process over the Christmas holidays. So ultimately, we will test and judge all of these issues on the basis of how they operate in practice and whether they deliver the unfettered access we were promised as far back as the joint UK-EU report of December 2017. There will need to be further urgent work undertaken by the UK Government to deliver for Northern Ireland, particularly on those matters where a final outcome has not yet been secured. Government needs to be bold and, where necessary, prepared to act unilaterally to bring about those outcomes that underpin our full place in the most important internal market for us, that of the United Kingdom. Mr. Speaker, I move the motion.
Thank you. And I call Kiva Archibald to move amendment number 1.
Concordia, and I welcome the opportunity to contribute to this important debate.
Can you move the motion?
Oh, sorry, I move.
Okay, thank you. You will have 10 minutes to propose Amendment 1 and 5 minutes to wind. Please now open the debate on Amendment number 1.
Concordia, and as I said, I welcome the opportunity to contribute to this important debate. Politically and in every other way, this year has been dominated by the coronavirus pandemic. However, for the last 5 years, one issue, in fact one word, has dominated our political discourse, and that is Brexit. There is, of course, no mandate for Brexit that is being foisted upon the people of the North. Our wishes have been ignored by a detached and disinterested British government, in fact, successive British governments. This Assembly has not consented to Brexit, and Sinn Féin will not be given our consent to an LCM on this Tory Brexit agreement. Wales and Scotland likewise are not giving consent to what is essentially a hard Brexit, a bad deal for us all. As Manufacturing NI said, it's the first trade deal that makes trade more difficult than the current status quo. Brexit is an agenda that was driven by narrow English nationalist motives and the harking back to the halcyon days of an empire long gone. Its casualties are our businesses and economy, the rights of young people and citizens, our European funding and workers across Britain and the North. The trade deal agreed on Christmas Eve may mark a new chapter, but Brexit and its consequences will be with us for the foreseeable future. To be abundantly clear, there is simply no good Brexit. There is a trade deal which is better than none, and the protocol to provide some mitigation from the worst impacts. But it remains a fact that we are now enjoying less favourable circumstances in terms of our trade, our relationships and ease of movement, and our funding than we enjoyed as members of the EU. How anyone can celebrate that is beyond me. No, I don't get an extra minute. For many businesses and organisations and individuals, what becomes reality on the 1st of January remains a confusing mess. Lack of preparation time as the British Government ran down the clock until the last minute, throwing spanners in the work with the IM bill along the way that hindered progress, mean there's just 1 week between a deal being agreed and it becoming effective. Businesses, like the rest of us, are still digesting the details and their implications. The protocol agreed when the withdrawal agreement does provide some protection, ensuring no hardening of the border across this island, which ensures that all island supply chains vital in some sectors can continue. However, Brexit brings the gift of friction, and that friction is now in the Irish Sea. It will undoubtedly bring with it difficulties and complexities for business. No one has ever argued that the protocol is some silver bullet. But imagine how worse it would be if there was no protocol and we were looking at a regulatory border across this island, right in the middle of those vital supply chains. Those arguing against the protocol need to remind themselves why there is a protocol. It's because of Brexit, and in most cases, a Brexit that they championed. The agreement on the protocol that preceded the trade deal provides some relief for businesses through the grace periods, but we need to see real effort by the British Government and its agencies in ensuring those periods are utilised and that when they end, the difficulties are minimised. We need the Trader Support Service to do what its name suggests and support those businesses trading between here and Britain. And we really need to see considerable resources in place to make sure that that happens. The Department for the Economy and its agencies need to step up and ensure that all businesses of all sizes, including our small and micro businesses, have access to the information and support that they need, and that the practical realities of trade is communicated effectively. Of course, it seems to have come as a surprise to some DUP ministers that their departments are now facing a loss of funding as a result of Brexit. No one could have seriously believed that the British Government was going to fund us to the same extent as the considerable EU funds we received. And whatever those on the other side of this chamber might argue, We here in the North have been a net beneficiary of EU funding. We have benefited considerably, much beyond our Barnett consequential from EU funding. Our farmers, our universities, our community and voluntary sector all rely considerably on EU funding and are all now depending on the much-mooted Shared Prosperity Fund, but still unclear as to what that funding picture will be and how it will be administered. While we effectively left the EU in January of this year, and some across the Chamber will for ideological reasons welcome that, come tomorrow night, when it is a practical reality, there will be many here who will feel sadness and loss. People who consider themselves European as well as British or Irish, who valued their rights and entitlements as EU citizens, and who now face a loss of some of those. Ironically, it's the Irish Government that has stepped up and offered some continuation of those rights. They are going to fund Erasmus for our young people so that they can continue to benefit from that important opportunity to work and study across the EU. They are going to continue to ensure that citizens here can continue to access the European Health Insurance Card. We are lucky that to date our interests, those of our citizens, our economy, our businesses and our peace agreements have been championed by the EU. But we need to be able to have our voices heard in the future. All those sectors mentioned before, our farmers, our university, our community and voluntary sector, need to be able to input into future where EU regulations will continue to apply. And we need to see real effective North-South collaboration to ensure this happens. The protocol provides protection for the all-island economy and North-South cooperation. We need to build on this. There are huge opportunities to build on relationships across this island with access to the EU that must be capitalised upon, in particular as we plan the recovery from COVID-19 and seek to take the necessary action to address the climate emergency. Of course, for those citizens who do value their EU citizenship, there is a route back to the EU through a unity referendum, and that is a debate and conversation that only continues to grow. Garmagad.
Thank you. And I call Steve Aiken to move amendment number 2.
Moved.
Thank you. And you will have 10 minutes to propose amendment 2 and 5 minutes to wind.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Mr. Speaker, I rise to speak on our amendment, and I call on all parties across this Assembly and joining us in calling for the UK Government to exercise what they need to do to put the people of Northern Ireland first and apply the safeguards that are laid out in the protocol because of the forthcoming depression that this is likely to occur. We're calling for both the UK and EU governments to recognise that the so-called Trade and Cooperation Treaty does not make Northern Ireland's position easier, and the very severe implications of the imposition of this unequal protocol treaty, and agree to derogate the requirements for its many provisions to be introduced for a year at least, the reasons and need for which are becoming abundantly and overwhelmingly clear. There are many flaws in the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, not least in that its provisions were to have ameliorated the worst aspects of the Northern Ireland Protocol. And whereas the threat of tariffs have been removed for now, the non-tariff barriers are to such a degree that they will significantly distort business, agriculture, trade, security, and not least how democratic accountability is provided for the people here in Northern Ireland. Sadly, we have already heard from some that the Northern Ireland Protocol needs to be made to work, as it is some form of safeguard to the Belfast Agreement, when it is patently not the case. On Friday, we will, with the imposition of the Irish Sea border, be in a place apart. A new place that, as we approach our centenary, some in this Assembly will welcome as some sort of precursor of an economic island entity, ignoring totally the reality of the massive impact on our own economy and our own people and our own democracy, the only factor that we as MLAs should be focusing on. Indeed, who better to explain this than the DUP's own very recent best friends, the Conservative European Research Group, who stated only yesterday that the protocol provides for continuing direct jurisdiction of the European Commission within Northern Ireland and binding ECJ jurisdiction, with somehow Boris Johnson stretching the truth again by stating today that the ECJ would have no role in the United Kingdom. Just who is he kidding? And neither the primacy of the European Commission or the ECJ is capable of being challenged by this Assembly. But turning specifically to the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, let's take, for example, the bizarre rule that through the TCA, goods going from GB to the EU, including the Republic of Ireland, will not be subject to customs rules for up to 6 months. Yet, in Northern Ireland, because of the Northern Ireland Protocol, we are part of the EU customs zones. Customs formalities will apply to all goods moving from GB into Northern Ireland from Friday. We will also have to apply controls over regulated goods such as chemicals, food, automotive and medicines. EU requirements on approval, labelling and packaging will have to be met before these can be placed on the Northern Ireland market. This is particularly the case for product labelling and country NI identification marks, controls that very few of our businesses are ready for or are likely to be for well over a year. In agriculture and agribusiness, we've been told our sausages are safe, by no lesser figure than Michael Gove, for a maximum of 6 months. Taking aside the flippancy of his remarks, it highlights that under the TCA, less generous provisions have been made for the UK than, for instance, between New Zealand and the EU. The level of special sanitary services checks will have to be made from our own major supplier of food, our own nation, and are significantly more than those that are required for our Antipodean friends, again adding costs and may significantly reduce supply. We are also seeing significant disruptions to our parcel trade. Right when, due to COVID, the e-economy has never been more important, due to customs requirements that are not being required elsewhere in our nation. The requirement for a level playing field to be maintained, whilst the stated aim of Brexit was to allow the UK to diverge, and will also create a significant problem in that EU subsidiary state aid rules, to which we in Northern Ireland must remain aligned under the protocol, will negatively impact our ability to compete in the UK internal market and associated opportunities to fully benefit from inclusion in future UK free trade agreements. We can already envisage support for our aerospace industry being challenged by the EU, as would the very necessary additional support we will have to give to our airports and our air routes, as our competitors at Dublin Airport will have additional benefits of duty-free, which we will not. This is not the best of both worlds. It's not even the least worst option. It's an EU Boris Johnson-created economic potential depression. But, Mr. Speaker, it is a potential disaster in the making that the full implications are only beginning to roll out, that we as an Assembly have no say in. Before Christmas, I raised the issue with the First Minister at questions about whether she or her Deputy First Minister had raised these issues at the Joint Committee, and further, whether she'd asked for Article 16 to be triggered. She stated that this was the role for the EU and UK representatives. This is a failure of leadership. We should, at this very point, all be pointing out the dangers ahead. This, as we in the DUP have pointed out time and again, shows the massive democratic failure of the protocol. For the most important question on our economy post-COVID, we have absolutely no say. None. The only role that this Assembly has, and executive ministers has, is to nod through and accept legislation and regulation set elsewhere. If this is not a definition of undermining the principle of consent as set out in the Belfast Agreement, I do not know what is. So, we as an Assembly, regardless of whatever constitutional hue, must have a mechanism to call a stop to actions that we can already see that is leading directly to serious economic, societal, and environmental difficulties that will persist and will severely impact on an already much COVID-damaged economy. And until we achieve the ability for Northern Ireland and its executive to call for the triggering of Article 16 to protect us from the forms of this imposition of the protocol, we should all today, as members of this Assembly, be clearly calling for the UK Government to trigger that today. These safeguards need to be implemented to be able to secure our economy and to help us through these extraordinarily difficult times. Mr. Speaker, I ask this Assembly to support our amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, and I call Gary Middleton to move amendment number 3.
Moved.
Thank you, and the member will have 10 minutes to propose amendment 3 and 5 minutes to wind. Please open the debate on amendment 3.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome the opportunity to speak on this debate today. Just a few months ago, in a survey conducted by the Northern Ireland Chamber, it found that only 7% of traders surveyed thought they understood trading terms once the transition period ends. Businesses throughout this process have been consistent in their calls for clarity. Unlike many members in this chamber, there's an acceptance from business that the result of the referendum was very clear and that there was a democratic process which brought about the UK leaving the European Union. Our ministers, our First Minister, our ministers, our MLAs and colleagues, including myself, have engaged with those businesses and listened to the real concerns throughout our constituencies. The UK-EU agreement reached on Christmas Eve removes a cliff edge relating to tariffs and quotas for the whole of the United Kingdom in trade with the EU. This has, of course, been welcomed by many. Whilst we accept that this agreement does bring about zero tariff and quota arrangements between the UK and the EU, thus removing many goods from attracting tariffs between GB and NI. The fact remains, however, that this agreement does not assist Northern Ireland in the context of having to operate under the Northern Ireland Protocol. Ultimately, this agreement is intended to mitigate some elements of the protocol that pose a serious risk to local business. However, it doesn't override the fact that the protocol, by allowing divergence in regulations between different parts of the UK, can never provide the standstill certainty or security that many of our businesses need and deserve. Additional work, as my party leader has said, will be required to ensure that we can maintain free-flowing trade between Great Britain into Northern Ireland. That position is indeed reflected in our amendment today, which we have tabled, and we would urge members across this House to support that. A free trade deal is better than no deal, but for Northern Ireland, this deal does not undo the detrimental aspects of the protocol. Again, as I've said, there will be a need for further urgent work to be undertaken by the UK Government to deliver for Northern Ireland, particularly on those matters where a final outcome has not yet been secured. The Government needs to be bold and, where necessary, be prepared to act unilaterally to bring about those outcomes that underpin our full place in the most important internal market for us, that of the United Kingdom. For our part, as a party, we will continue to work with the business community to strengthen Northern Ireland's economic position post-Brexit and indeed post-COVID. In the coming period and in the aftermath of COVID-19, it is important that we work to strengthen Northern Ireland's economic position, and we are committed to working with our business and industry representatives to help them as we collectively try to rebuild our economy. That will also involve working with the Government to mitigate against those damaging practical outcomes flowing from the protocol. The DUP has consistently opposed the imposition of the protocol. We continue to believe it will damage rather than promote the prosperity across the province. Let's not forget the driving force behind the protocol was an inaccurate and hyped-up argument about the sanctity of the border and the Belfast Agreement. I will indeed.
I'm grateful to the member for giving way. The member agreed with me that when we're referring to the Belfast Agreement, some members see it as the law of the Medes and the Persians, cast in stone and irrevocable. That's all well and good until it comes to the principle of dual consent, which apparently those who have argued for dual consent in this place for 30 years suddenly believe in majorities getting their own way.
I thank the member for his contribution, a very important one and one which I completely agree with, and I will touch on it more in a few moments' time. Again, let us not forget what the driving force was behind the protocol. We have seen play acting and some amateur dramatics on the border. We've seen inflammatory and divisive language being used, Brit bashing regularly within this chamber. Isn't it ironic that the very people who used the border to their advantage during the terrorist campaign are now the very people that are trying to say that they are acting in the best interests of those people who live here? I think the majority of people in Northern Ireland will understand that that is just not the case. In reality, businesses and families here in Northern Ireland will judge any deal not by those notions, but through the lens of everyday prosperity. Our guiding principle has been that Northern Ireland's place within the internal market of the United Kingdom must not be undermined, and Northern Ireland must continue to enjoy unfettered access to GB. To what extent arrangements impact in practice on this trade or on jobs, incomes and choice of the supermarkets will be the true test of what has been agreed. Finally, as has been mentioned already, these measures are ultimately temporary measures, and the NI Assembly will eventually have to have its say. But the Government needs to be prepared to act unilaterally to underpin our place in the UK market. These arrangements flowing from the protocol are, of course, temporary, and that the Northern Ireland Assembly will have the opportunity to revisit the protocol and vote upon it in 4 years' time. We would remind everybody involved, and the European Union specifically, that unless arrangements have the support of both Unionists and Nationalists in Northern Ireland, they will ultimately fail. And on that basis, it is imperative that on-the-ground implementation does not in any way disadvantage the people of Northern Ireland or our place within the United Kingdom. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I would urge members across this House to support the amendment put forward by our party. Listen to the many voices out there in the public domain and support those within our communities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. And I call Nicola Mallon to move amendment number 4.
Moved.
Thank you, and you will have 10 minutes to propose amendment 4 and 5 minutes to wind. Please continue the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Here we are in Christmas week, and democracy takes no break for holidays. And it is quite right that we have come back here today to debate and, through our amendment, have the opportunity to vote on this very significant and far-reaching issue, just as the other devolved administrations are doing. Brexit and its fallout, including the trade deal which was heralded over the weekend, will have far-reaching consequences for all of us on this island, and especially for us here in the north. Our young people especially will live with the Brexit factor for years to come. I will be very clear here today. The SDLP wanted no part of Brexit, and importantly, nor did the people we represent. We believe that the future of this island is best served by being in the heart of the European project, not at the sidelines, or even worse, with our noses pressed up against the glass of the EU. And I make this pledge today to the people of Northern Ireland on behalf of the SDLP. Now that we have been forced out of the European Union against our will, against the democratically expressed will of the overwhelming majority of our people, we will, for as long as it takes, campaign for our return to full membership of the European Union. That can happen through another UK referendum, which will happen sooner or later, and it will be propelled by the experience and the realisation of the Welsh, Scottish and Irish people that their political future was, in the years between 2016 and 2020, forged by a narrow English nationalism which was facilitated by the DUP and allowed to override the needs and the wishes of the rest of us. This referendum result will be undone by the generations not yet old enough to vote, but it will be undone, and the SDLP will be part of the great undoing. It can also happen, Mr. Speaker, through the reconciliation and realignment of Ireland as a political entity. It was Mark Durkan, when he was the MP for Foyle, who secured the written clarification from the then British Government Brexit Secretary David Davies, subsequently confirmed in a European Council declaration, that Northern Ireland is the only part of these islands that can rejoin the European Union without an Article 49 negotiation. Just as the SDLP was at the heart of that important act, we will continue to be at the heart of that movement too. There is no good Brexit, Mr. Speaker. The SDLP never wanted any Brexit. But it was very important for our business community that Brexit was accompanied with a trade deal, and in partnership with the trade bodies, we are working through the deal that was published at the weekend, and we will continue to work with them to ensure that Northern Ireland as a region benefits where possible from the incoming arrangements. The fact that 3 of the 5 executive parties were always opposed to Brexit and recorded that opposition in votes in this chamber says a lot about what Brexit means for Northern Ireland. As for the other 2 parties, well, it's not clear where the UUP stand on Brexit. And as for the DUP, just a few months ago, they were feted by Boris Johnson, by the ERG, the Tory media, and by the shady financial backers of their famous London newspaper Brexit ads. Boris Johnson has lied to them so often, so publicly, and so consistently that it's painful. But the truth, regardless of the deflection tactics, is that this is a self-inflicted wound. Brexit, the Northern Ireland Protocol, the trade deal, the sea border, all of it belongs to the DUP, lock, stock and barrel. They try to deny it, pass the responsibility on to others, but the people of Northern Ireland are not stupid. The businesses of Northern Ireland are not stupid. The trade unions, civic society and the third sector, all who stand to lose out, are not stupid. And it would be good if the DUP stopped acting like we are stupid. As an example, InvestNI will lose out on approximately £90 million a year as a direct consequence of Brexit. InvestNI, whose job it is to attract new business and support existing businesses here in the north, and is at the heart of the Department of the Economy, will take a massive Brexit hit. That means our constituents, the businesses which employ our people and which offer a route to post-COVID recovery, will lose out. That is the outworkings of the DUP's positioning on Brexit. That is the reality of their Brexit in Northern Ireland. The DUP will today in Westminster vote against the EU-UK trade deal. What an irony. They also now, via our amendment, have the opportunity to withhold consent in this House. All parties do. Today, the SDLP is moving this amendment because just as Scotland and Wales have had their say on whether this trade deal is acceptable to their people, so should our Assembly. For 3 years, we were denied an Assembly and a government. But today, we have an Assembly and an executive, and we must make our voice heard. We must allow the voice of our citizens to be heard, to oppose a British-imposed Brexit on the lives of people across Northern Ireland. The SDLP is asking this Assembly to reaffirm our rejection of Brexit and to decline legislative consent to the British Government to impose a European Union Future Relationship Bill, which will bring new barriers to trade and negative consequences for our society and our economy. This inferior trade bill does not protect the interests of our economy or our people in the way that Northern Ireland deserves. Professor David Finnemore of Queen's University Belfast points to the thinness of the agreement in areas such as services on which our economy relies. He summed up the challenge clearly when he remarked, "The substance of arrangements does little to address the disruption that Brexit will cause for cross-border cooperation." And while we recognise and have long called for the full implementation of the protocol, the Northern Ireland Protocol remains as it is. While the SDLP recognises there are aspects of the deal which are helpful and welcome, many provisions are limited and many of the challenges that Brexit has threatened for years will now impact on our society and economy. This Assembly must recognise the magnitude of this moment, the seriousness of the context in which we will now be forced to live. The days and weeks ahead will present new challenges, and we all must rise to them for our citizens, because we all know the hard, cold truth that London simply isn't interested in our interests. A deal will always be better than no deal, but the SDLP never ever said any deal will be acceptable. And this Assembly should not accept the imposition of an inferior bill or deal that leaves Northern Ireland worse off and our people with a future less than they deserve. I understand Scotland and Wales are to reject this deal. They are to reject the future that Boris Johnson and his cronies in Number 10 want. We should also make clear our rejection of a narrow, isolated future, not on our own behalf, but on behalf of those we represent. The European Union as an ideal is about bringing people together. On one level, it is as simple as that. This year, in the SDLP, we lost our spiritual and political leader, John Hume. John believed that our membership of the European Union was a key factor in bringing about peace to this island we share. He said, membership of the EU has obliged people to work together in promoting common interests within the EU. The EU has also helped to promote better relations between North and South as people discovered their common interests. Mr. Speaker, the SDLP has always argued against the erection of new borders or new barriers anywhere across these islands. That's why we, uniquely among parties in Northern Ireland, registered to campaign against Brexit. It's why we proposed remaining in the European single market and the customs union. We have proposed solutions that will mitigate the damage caused by withdrawal from the EU because we understand the economic impact of new trade friction points, but we also understand the psychological impact of new land or sea borders on people and communities. The sad truth, a constant in our political history, is that all of this was entirely avoidable. One beacon of light this week, however, in the wake of the Brexit trade deal, was the clarification from the Irish Government that they will continue to facilitate third-level students here to access the Erasmus programme, no matter the colour of their passport. And I want to say that the SDLP welcomes the efforts of the Irish Government, and in particular their work to protect our island from a hard border. While this deal is less than we deserve, we do recognise the effort that has been made for people across Ireland. Mr. Speaker, we have to live with this trade deal because we have no choice, but there should be no celebration in this moment for either side. As a party, the SDLP has a strong history of bringing our people and communities together, and we in the SDLP will keep on working, keep on talking, and keep on doing proper, mature politics to reconcile our people, to free them from poverty, prejudice and injustice, and put them back at the heart of the European project.
Thank you. Before I call the next speaker, just remind all members now that have 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes, and I call Stuart Dixon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm a European, and no one will take that away from me. I rise as an Alliance Party economy spokesperson, and I welcome the opportunity to speak in this debate today. The Alliance Party will be supporting Amendments 1 and 4 and opposing Amendments 2 and 3. I don't think it could come much later, but this has been another page in the history books of what has been a dire and difficult year. It is a moment of sorrow and reflection at what we're ultimately losing after being on a roller coaster that people and businesses boarded in 2016 or indeed even earlier. Someone has already quoted Churchill in the chamber today, and I will do also. If you destroy a free market, you create a black market. Mr. Speaker, there is no such thing as a good Brexit. It builds on outdated notions of a nation-state and is designed to put up walls, causing friction, distancing ourselves from the largest trading bloc in the world. It demotes the United Kingdom in terms of diplomatic influence, leaving us a more isolated, medium-sized economy in a world of large trading blocs. It really didn't need to be this way. We could have, for example, left the political structures but stayed in the single market and/or the customs union. But instead, we now have a mess of red tape, barriers and bureaucracy for businesses and individuals. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, we have more rules today than those which we're leaving behind. In regards to the protocol, it is to be welcomed that we have a grace period and increasing clarity. But ongoing flexibility and support will be vital. We don't want to put up barriers to trade anywhere, but that's exactly what this type of Brexit and the UK government has chosen to do. The protocol is the outcome of such choices, and we must make it as frictionless as is possible. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the agreement leaves behind our participation in a range of activities such as the European Structural and Investment Funds. Alliance have serious concerns about the shambolic and half-hearted plans, for example, for the Shared Prosperity Fund, which is supposed to replace them. We still have little information on the amount of funding, the design of the programme and who indeed will manage it, all while groups that are funded via the European Social Fund, for example, are telling us that they need information and certainty now. It is regrettable and also welcome that the Irish Government has had to step in to prevent Northern Ireland citizens from losing some of their rights, from European health insurance to participation in the Erasmus Plus programme. I hope that there is further scope for participation in other programmes, such as the European Solidarity Corps, if the UK continues its disinterest in continuing these key initiatives that many of our people, businesses and voluntary organisations directly benefit from in Northern Ireland. So, Mr. Speaker, this is indeed where we are. Unfortunately, this process has shown the limits of our influence, not least of all to one particular political party in this chamber, despite all their vaunted promises. Nevertheless, Mr. Speaker, we have to work with what we've got. Perhaps there's one silver lining. With suitable flexibilities, streamlining and, crucially, certainly Northern Ireland may indeed be an advantage with regards to the rest of the United Kingdom and Ireland in terms of goods. And I'd like to see that work continue, and particularly through our Department of the Economy. However, it has been mentioned that services are to be excluded from this, which, in a service-based economy, will represent huge barriers to our businesses and our customers. I would hope that we could make progress on this and the considerable benefits that could be realised with proper participation in a single market. People living on the border well know the nuisance of roaming charges, for example, and the United Kingdom Government should now be taking action to ensure that those charges will not return. Mr. Speaker, I don't think anyone here can be happy with the Brexit we have, for many different reasons. It's clear that it will harm the Northern Ireland and the United Kingdom, and that this deal is far from what our economy and society needs. The Brexit process is far from over, and those that think that today will end the debate are living in cloud cuckoo land. We will be debating the impacts and the problems of this Brexit and the consequences of this Brexit for many years to come. My party will work to continue to build bridges, not borders. That is what the Alliance Party stands for in this community. We will be working towards the closest relationship possible with the European Union, and we will work to mitigate as far as possible the social and economic damage that Brexit threatens. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, and I call Mervyn Storey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm glad to take part in this debate today. And we've had some references by the First Minister open the debate by quoting one of our nation's greatest Prime Minister, Sir Winston Churchill, as did the predecessor before me, Mr. Dixon. And I'll follow in that vein. It was Sir Winston Churchill who said, "A pessimist sees a difficulty in every opportunity, an optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty." Mr. Speaker, we've heard in this chamber today all the woes, all the ills, all the concerns, all the difficulties that are going to beset us as we leave the European Union. And let's remember, we are doing so not because there was a democratic deficit, but we are doing so because the United Kingdom voted so to do. We've heard a lot today about the principle of consent. As my colleague has rightly said in an intervention, all of a sudden now, the principle of consent has almost been consigned to history by the references to the Belfast Agreement. And let's remember, yes?
I asked Mrs Mallon to give way, but she chose not to. In her remarks, Mrs Mallon referred to Scottish people, Welsh people and Irish people. Does my friend think it telling that she couldn't find it within herself to refer to British people? And what does that say about her vision of the future?
Member has an extra minute.
And that is the case. And I'll say again, as I've said in this House, when are we going to have respect for Northern Ireland? As we stand on the verge of celebrating our 100th anniversary, there are still the derogatory comments, the North. Well, that's Donegal and Malin Head, because the North in Northern Ireland is Rathlin. So let me say, let's have some respect. Let's show respect to Northern Ireland. But of course, what we have seen over the last days is trying to undermine the democratic principles. Like Mrs Mallon said, that there will be another referendum. We will undo what has been done. So what if that referendum gives us the same outcome? Will they then accept the democratic wish of the people of the United Kingdom? Some time ago, most members will know that I don't read maybe a lot of books. I have plenty of books, but I'm maybe not the world's greatest reader. But I had read A Clean Brexit. And it was interesting that in that book it was made reference to some of the great events that took place over 2 centuries ago, which changed the political landscape of these islands. 1846, the repeal of the Corn Laws. 1831, when the UK left the gold standard. 1945, after the Second World War, our nation was on its knees. It was out of the ashes of that terrible time in our nation's history that the National Health Service became a reality, that national insurance became a reality, that free compulsory secondary schooling became a reality. And of course, in 1979, we had the Thatcher Revolution, which gave to this nation economic prosperity. All we have heard this morning is, we're going to lose. We're going to be those who are going to be worse off. As one commentator said yesterday, this is not the best of all deals, but it's not the worst of all deals. And so what I would suggest to the members in this House who voted to leave the European Union is to show that sense of optimism and show some respect to the democratic principles. The representative from Sinn Féin talked about there was no mandate for Brexit. Well, there was a mandate. She then also went on to refer to the fact that it was driven by narrow nationalism. Now, Sinn Féin wouldn't be engaged in anything like that. They wouldn't be engaged in any party politics like that. And then, of course, coming from the member from the constituency that she represents, she talked about the impact on our businesses. What happened 28 years ago on the 13th of November 1992 in the town that she represents, when the IRA blew the heart out of Coleraine? That was seen as politically opportunistic. That was seen as advancing the cause. And now we have a party in this House that has opposed Europe at every stage down through the years. Now, because of political opportunism, not because of some pragmatism, they see an opportunity to do Northern Ireland down. Mr. Speaker, I stand here today realising there are challenges ahead. But I also, as I come in, say there are opportunities. And let us give the message to our businesses that we will work with them, that we will do everything for them to ensure that they prosper, that they build a better future for us all. And that prosperity is not tagged with orange and green. It's not tagged with nationalism or with some other political ideology. It is driven by the best interests of the people that we represent. And so I say to the members of this House today, let us ensure that we do have a debate, but a debate that's based on reality. The member for the SDLP also mentioned a legislative consent motion, and I think the Sinn Féin representative said that they wouldn't be giving their consent. You'll be glad to know we don't need a legislative consent, because this will be passed in the House of Commons, the very place where the members opposite stay away but still get their allowances.
Thank you, and I call Daglan McAleer.
Thank you, and I welcome the opportunity today to speak on today's motion and in support of Amendment 1 and Amendment 4. Speaking today from agriculture and rural affairs perspective, I just want to point out that the food and drink sector here in the north employs 100,000 people. We feed 10 million people, and it's actually 30% of private sector employment. And for the last 4 years, the whole Brexit crisis, which we didn't vote for here in the north, has caused absolute mayhem in the sector. The north voted to remain, and Brexit's an imposition on all of us. Brexit, I should say, with or without this deal, causes friction, and friction causes delay and cost. From the 1st of January, there will be non-tariff barriers to trade east and west. We will have SBS checks on goods trading across the REC. And I noted commentary from the British Government at the weekend, who estimate that 40 to 70% of freight arriving at the ports will not have the appropriate documentation to sail. Now, that's absolutely incredible. That's a huge burden on those drivers, and we've seen what happened to them at Dover over the Christmas break. But also, we're dealing with perishable stock, perishable food coming across, and that has potential to cause mayhem. And we see over in Wales at Holyhead, they're creating a contraflow to deal with that, and in Carnryan, they're releasing a disused airport to cope with that possibility, and that's a consequence of Brexit, which could have a huge impact for us here. And again, come 1st of January, we will have our customs, our SPS in check, and next year we will have the custom arrangements in place. Again, all of this can add more bureaucracy and more cost to the consumers and businesses here. The sheep issue, there's thousands of sheep stranded over in Scotland, can't come across here. This not as a consequence of Brexit. No resolution to the seed potatoes issue. And indeed, there's no resolution to the breeding animals. Breeding animals can't come across here. There's a huge impact on the pedigree trade. Briefly, yes.
Thank the member for giving way. Will he then find it strange that his colleague in the Irish Parliament, Matt Carthy, Sinn Féin spokesman, his equivalent, actually was critical of the reduction in the money currently in relation to EU, when he said the common agricultural policy has taken a huge hit and It has been reduced since 2014, and the Rural Development Fund has also taken a substantial cut and has been halved. That was when we were part of the European Union. What does he say to that?
Well, thank you, member, and he preempted me because it was coming to the topic of funding. One of the biggest consequences of us leaving the EU against our will is the fact that we're going to lose EU funding, and we get £300 million a year on average for single farm payment, which is 100% EU funded monies, goes directly to our farmers, our agri-food businesses, to keep them going. Whilst we have got promises up until the end of this mandate from the British Government, there is nothing beyond that there at all. Also, in relation to the Rural Development Programme, we've been dragged out of the Rural Development Programme as well. Again, the previous programme, which the former Agriculture Minister, who's now the Diverse Minister, introduced, was a £623 million programme for over the course of that 6 years. We've been taken out of that there. And not only are we taken out of that there, we've been netted, the £34 million that we hadn't spent, we aren't being allowed to carry it over into the next financial year. And that £34 million is only there because there was some unspent money as a result of COVID. So it was very nasty, and also as a signal of the British Government's intent towards here. The separate state aid regime, there's a separate state aid regime across in Britain as well, which again has the potential to place our agribusinesses at a disadvantage. One of the things that I think is spooking the sector as well, and again, this is to do with Brexit and indeed the recent deal, is it's very clear that Britain has an agenda to open up their market access to trade deals with Australia, New Zealand, Canada, USA and the Mercosur countries in South America. Now, that could have a potentially huge impact for farmers here and indeed in the south of Ireland as well, because Britain, as has been quite rightly pointed out here on many occasions, is the biggest market. But if we have a situation where Britain enters into trade deals with international, especially those big agriculture exporting countries, will displace our share in the British market and have a huge impact for our producers here. Labour, in terms of labour, 70% of employees in processing factories here are from other countries beyond Britain and Ireland, mostly from the EU. And indeed, our vets as well. 95% of our vets who are in abattoirs have graduated overseas, mostly from other EU countries. And we're not 100% sure what the situation will be after the transition period. Indeed, this recent deal has came about that there's no reference to rolling over of the recognition of professional qualifications. Again, same thing with fish. The Sea of Opportunity promises were made by the British Government. However, the British fishing industry will lose their frictionless trade with the EU, and indeed the 25% increase in the quota may well be outweighed by the additional costs and burdens of bureaucracy. Just to sort of conclude, I heard British Prime Ministers there mention Churchill's mentioned a few times, but one person who has got right is the former Deputy British Prime Minister, Michael Heseltine. He's been getting right all along. He said, "We must welcome the news that Brexit does not end in the chaos of a no deal, but only with the sense of relief of a condemned man who's informed that his execution has been committed to a life sentence."
Thank you. And I call Paul Given.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 2016, the people of the United Kingdom voted to remove themselves from the European Union. Yes, it divided the nation, it divided this country, but a majority nevertheless voted to leave the European Union. And they voted to leave, those arguments well rehearsed, because they wanted to take back control. They wanted to have sovereignty. They wanted to have power with the people, close to the people where it resides. It wanted to have parliamentary sovereignty in the United Kingdom. It wanted judicial sovereignty in the United Kingdom. And that's what the people voted for. They wanted to vote for an open United Kingdom with the rest of the world, not shackled to 27 other European countries and the restrictive nature in which it operates in a global perspective. And they voted for that openness. Those hopes have not been fully realised. Even in this deal, it has not been fully realised for those in Great Britain. It certainly hasn't been fully realised here for the people of Northern Ireland. But what motivated people to vote in 2016 for those fundamental freedoms are the same values that will continue to drive those of us on these benches to realise the dreams of those people. But it is the political elite that regard those people as the stupid ones. Nicola Mallon referenced stupidity. Those peasants that voted to get out of the European Union, the political elite, they're the ones that know better. Far be it for the political class to fulfil the ambitions of the people that voted. Indeed, the SDLP said they're against any deal that resulted from the democratic wishes of the people of the United Kingdom. So we know the democratic principles of the SDLP run very, very thin when it comes to respecting the wishes of the people. But we'll continue to fight for that. Then we had the movement that took place to introduce the protocol, a protocol that is owned by the SDLP, by Sinn Féin, by the Alliance Party. So when we look at the costs that are going to be placed upon our businesses, look no further than those three political parties in this chamber. Of course, the Republic of Ireland didn't help. They didn't want to police their own border, and so they pushed for the kind of barriers to be put up when it came through in the protocol, because they're unable to actually carry out the basic functions on behalf of the European Union to provide integrity within the border, and so they didn't want to do it here. But there was a priority given to North-South relationships, and I can understand that from Sinn Féin and the SDLP. But the Alliance Party prioritised North-South to the detriment of East-West, and that will not be lost upon the people of Northern Ireland. The increased costs, that bureaucracy, that's owned by those parties that failed to accept Brexit in terms of those that voted for it in 2016. But there are opportunities, Mr. Speaker. There's opportunities through the Joint Committee, and I hope that we see a much more productive engagement by the Republic of Ireland, albeit they've succeeded their powers to the European Union when it comes to the Commission and so on. But we need to see them now working in the interests of businesses here in Northern Ireland. If they want to create the best of both worlds, the power is in the hands of the European Union to put Northern Ireland first. If we're part of the single market, make sure there are no barriers then when it comes to trading, because they are still insisting upon barriers being put up. Of course, Her Majesty's government have now got the power to act unilaterally if there is economic disadvantage placed upon the people of Northern Ireland. And so they can do that because we have given them the power to do it as a result of Brexit. I'll give way.
Having opposed entry into the common market, having opposed the Single European Act, having opposed the Maastricht Treaty, having opposed the Lisbon Treaty, having opposed the European Constitution, having opposed every single European treaty that created the EU, does my friend agree with me that it is rank hypocrisy for Sinn Féin to now pose as defenders of the European Union?
The member's absolutely right, and my colleague from North Antrim made these very points. Because the overriding objective for those that campaign for the reunification of Ireland, that is the overriding objective, and so any other principle will be cast away. So Sinn Féin dispensed with their Brexiteer position because that didn't suit the agenda that they have. They can explain why they prefer a globalist-based European Union system, distant from the working man and woman, from the people, remote to it, unaccountable, because that's the European Union that they want to remain shackled to. Of course, this debate leads us into the constant constitutional argument, but I'm confident that as Great Britain does benefit from the trade deals, we too benefit as a result of being part of the United Kingdom. And people will look in this jurisdiction to being part of the 5th largest economy in the world. They will look at the financial support that has been given to us, even over the past 12 months as a result of the COVID pandemic. They'll also look and see how the United Kingdom has led scientifically, and the vaccination programme that is being rolled out. Whilst I'm pleased the Republic of Ireland had their first injection yesterday, while we have 80% of our nursing homes now vaccinated. That's what people will look to when they test the tangible benefits of being within the United Kingdom. And so I'm confident that Northern Ireland's future is very secure for many generations to come within the union that matters, the United Kingdom.
Thank you, and I call Colm Gildernew.
I think I have to say it's ironic, and the First Minister and the last speaker mentioned the vaccine, and yesterday I welcomed the fact that over 33,000 people here have received the Pfizer vaccine, a vaccine that was developed by a Turkish immigrant working with a German company in conjunction with a Belgian manufacturing plant. The world has moved on. Britain has moved backwards. Narrow English exceptionalism, narrow English interests have taken over here, and there's no question. Yes, go ahead.
Likely that many of those researchers involved in the research to create those vaccines were funded by European funding.
Member has an extra minute.
Absolutely, and critical in relation to my role as health spokesperson for Sinn Féin. That is a critical point. But I also hear members opposite saying about the Winston Churchill extolling taking the opportunity from difficulty. He can hardly have meant that you would create the difficulty in order to find the opportunity. So I don't think that's overly relevant either. We have, and again, when he talks, a member opposite talks about looking on the negative and doom and gloom, surely he read the British government's own analysis right at the start of this, where they identified that there would inevitably, given that this was the first time a nation had entered trade negotiations to take themselves out of a trading arrangement, there would inevitably be additional costs, including non-trade, non-tariff costs. So, as part of my research for this, I serendipitously came upon the fact that the collective noun for turkeys is a rafter of turkeys. And what we are seeing at the present time in Westminster is a rafter of Tory turkeys voting for Christmas at Christmas time, and cheered to the rafters by the DUP all the way. And the unfortunate element of that is that we will all have to live with the damaging and lasting impacts which that is likely to bring, including within health. We have seen where the European health card is now being lost, and while the Irish government have stepped in and said that they will ensure that, there are no guarantees, and we need to see how that scheme rolls out in practice. Doctors, nurses, other regulated professionals will now have to wade their way through a maze of red tape to have their qualifications recognised, where at present we have a seamless system in place. This will, I believe, will have significant impact for cross-border health workers, crossing the border both directions. In relation to medicines and essential supplies, I have been discussing that issue with the Department of Health since 2019. We had been assured all along that this issue was dealt with. Supply chains would deal with the issue. Everything was in place. I made the point to them at the time, it doesn't matter what plans you have made. If your lorry can't get out of Kent to bring the medicines here, that's going to create a problem. And we have seen that writ large over the past couple of weeks. We depend upon an integrated supply chain for medicines. At the very last minute, a number of weeks ago, there actually had to be an arrangement arrived at whereby an additional 12 months would be bought. Not a solution to the problem, but breathing space to try to find a solution. But these are the types of problems that are piling up for us in terms of what Brexit is doing. There is no good Brexit. We didn't vote for it, but we're being dragged out along with the English government. And the member opposite talks about Brit bashing. I actually don't think there's been really much need. They're doing quite a good job of that themselves in terms of this self-inflicted, taking themselves out of a trade deal. There's also a significant problem that we have discovered in recent weeks, where the new immigration system that's being floated will impact very negatively on many EU citizens of the future, citizens who we need and value and who contribute in a whole range of ways across our business and our health and social care sectors. Surely, if one thing we have learned from COVID is that actually the skilled workers are those who are out there providing care, supplying equipment, those people on the front line, and we are now going to place additional barriers to their entry into our jobs market. We're going to put them through language tests. We're going to put salary levels in at a point which will discriminate against them. And these are, again, this notion of a skilled economy. We actually need workers right across a range of skills, but many of them will be discriminated against as a result of this regime that's been brought in. As my colleague mentioned earlier, the issue of research and cooperation across medicine has been evident in the past number of months, but in the future, we don't know. The Irish government again has said they will guarantee the Erasmus scheme, but those connections and those relationships matter. And we are about to throw a massive hurdle into the way of all of that, which will impact on our system here. At this present time, we're all quite aware of the high-level cooperation with the North West Cancer Centre and paediatric cardiology services. But there are over 150 other service-level agreements back and forward across the border, some of which may, or all of which may survive this trauma. However, the ongoing development of those linkages for the benefit of our population will now be under severe threat. And make no mistake about it, those things, on a small island, those things will matter. We need to ensure that we are working effectively and cooperatively with each other. And this, what we are seeing here at the present time is where the world has moved on, Britain has moved back. We cannot be dragged along in their wake. Our society deserves us to do better for them.
Thank you. And I call Sinead McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Brexit was always going to be bad for most of the people across the UK and across Ireland, north and south. This deal is not the worst possible outcome, because we now know that the British government accepts that a bad deal is better than a no deal. The past 5 years of self-inflicted political harm has already caused substantial damage through loss of investment, loss of potential jobs, and already the loss of some of our most valuable workers who have returned to those other parts of Europe from where they came to add value to our National Health Service, to our care homes and to our businesses. All this was obvious to most people in this Assembly from the outset. It has to be recorded that the DUP's support for Brexit was the biggest own goal for unionism. It was interesting to hear DUP MP Gregory Campbell speaking on BBC Radio earlier this week about the opportunities presented by Brexit for Northern Ireland's economy, as it would encourage companies to locate here, as it gives them access to both the EU and the UK markets. I now look forward to this executive putting in place an economic strategy that supports the growth of an all-island economy. I have been very disappointed not to have seen that as yet, but still Brexit will create a bad outcome for Northern Ireland. It is a particularly bad outcome for those citizens who choose to identify as British, and for those who were born in Britain and are not entitled to an Irish passport. The Irish Government has been proactive and decisive in protecting many rights of people living here in Northern Ireland, and not just those with Irish passports. Erasmus and the EU healthcare are just two examples. Thanks too is due to the European Union for their diplomacy of dignified calmness throughout this torturous negotiations. The EU and the Irish Government have worked tirelessly on behalf of the people on this island in order to keep an open border, recognising that it is essential for our economy, our cross-border social connections and for peace. The continuation of the peace programme is of enormous importance, especially for our border areas. The peace programmes have delivered much progress over the last 3 decades, and Peace Plus will continue that work. It is a clear sign that the EU remains committed to us here in the North and will not turn its back on us, just as the majority of the people in the North did not reject or link to the European Union. For many reasons, Northern Ireland is different from Great Britain. Along with Scotland, our voters wanted to stay in the European Union, to recognise their European identity, wanting cooperation and partnership with the European continent, our neighbours in the south and our neighbours in the east. Northern Ireland is also different economically from England, Scotland and Wales. Our businesses have more transactions with businesses in the south than they do with businesses in Britain. And Northern Ireland is unlike Scotland, Wales and England in doing more business outside of the UK than within the UK. Our future has to be outward-looking. focused on external trade, improving our productivity by investing in skills and infrastructure. We can do the best by embedding our relationships with the South. We need an all-island economy that builds infrastructure and prosperity. The reality is that Brexit will be the basis of much greater all-island cooperation and partnership. We will increasingly have much stronger all-island economy, and that is to be welcomed. We would like to take this opportunity to also strengthen our other all-island partnerships, especially in health and education. I particularly thank the Irish Government for its commitment to support the expansion of higher education in Derry, something that my party has been calling for from this Assembly for many decades. So I can see positives, but the cost has been severe. We have lost investments, we have lost jobs, and we have had our international relationships undermined. Many of our citizens have had rights removed to work, study and live in the EU. Some of our professional firms have new obstacles to doing cross-border business with the loss of recognition and qualifications. I ask members of this Assembly to please support Amendment number 4. Thank you.
Thank you. I call Doug Beattie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Happy New Year to all of you in the coming days. I hope it can be peaceful. Mr. Speaker, this motion asks for the Assembly to note the trade and cooperation agreement between the United Kingdom and the European Union, so I take note. I note the insidious Northern Ireland Protocol, which forms part of this trade and cooperation agreement. There will be a trade border down the Irish Sea separating Northern Ireland from the rest of the United Kingdom. And I note that the DNA of some unionists are on that protocol. I note the EU Erasmus Plus will be replaced by the UK Turing scheme, no doubt creating further division in Northern Ireland as some internally and externally try to undermine the United Kingdom as they try to create an educational resource. But the people will have the choice of both in Northern Ireland, be they British or Irish citizen. The European Health Insurance Card will continue for all citizens who hold one until its run-out date. It will be replaced by in the UK by the Global Health Insurance Card. Surely a good thing. But already I see people trying to undermine it. I don't get it. We will continue to coordinate with Europol and Eurojust, and I know that the European arrest warrant will be replaced by a surrender agreement, and I will look to see which friendly nation will adhere to the limited grounds for refusal mentioned in the agreement. Biometric material, including DNA, fingerprints, as well as vehicle registration details, will be shared between the UK and EU member states via member states' contact points in respect to law enforcement. But I do note the loss of access to the Schengen information system that may affect cross-border judicial cooperation in areas such as missing persons and the wider European Union in regards to missing persons. I note that Northern Ireland will remain under the direct jurisdiction of the European Commission and the European Courts of Justice. They do so without having any elected representation, no elected input. Northern Ireland ruled by committee. And this Assembly and some in this Assembly salivates at the idea of this. The draft trade agreement allows for cooperation on peaceful use of nuclear energy, including training cooperation, guarding, movement, transfers. This includes radioisotopes in medicines and radiation in agriculture. I note how the Belfast Agreement has been undermined at best and breached at worst, with no consideration from those, both in this Assembly and within the European Parliament, who said we must protect the agreement at all costs. The European Union will not ratify this trade and cooperation deal until the end of February. Therefore, it is still a draft deal and will remain a draft deal until that date. The First Minister is right when she says we are not at the end of the Brexit saga. But it's a great Brexit. But it's certainly not a UK Brexit. In both trade and justice, Northern Ireland have been separated from the United Kingdom. The Ulster Unionist Party warned of this impact on Northern Ireland's position within the UK, yet we were ignored, and instead some followed the lead of English nationalism, who have got absolutely no interest whatsoever in Northern Ireland. And we have to face that fact. I cannot support or be in favour of this trade or cooperation agreement. But my vote will be a protest vote, as will those at Westminster, because the government there, supported by Labour, will vote it through. As a unionist, my job is to maintain, protect and promote the union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So I am going to have to make it work. Because if I don't make it work, the people of Northern Ireland will suffer even more, and it will damage our union even more. That is a stark position. That I find myself in, and it's unenviable. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member's time's up. Thank you. And I call Andrew Muir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I also thank the First and Deputy First Ministers for bringing the debate here today. As we debate the motion and the amendments that have been selected, it is perhaps important to reflect upon the fact that the almost inevitable passing of the trade deal by Westminster today will result in a vastly different and new future for Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK from Friday. Over the course of our history, relations between our islands have improved and been strengthened, north and south, east and west, thanks to the EU. Friction has been removed, checks abolished and common standards enjoyed to protect the rights of workers, citizens, our environment and to enable businesses to grow. It saddens me greatly that in the year that such a passionate pro-European, namely John Hume, passed away, that we're set on a course away from the EU and the benefits that it offers. Whilst exit from the EU on the basis of the agreed deal is vastly better than a chaotic no-deal crash-out, it remains a fact that no matter how it's constructed, Brexit is bad for Northern Ireland, bad for people, bad for business and bad for the environment, and has triggered active, serious discussions about the constitutional future of both Scotland and Northern Ireland. For those who seek to deny that, take your head out of the sand. To then have had the DUP campaigning for Brexit and paying for advertisements in London newspapers makes it all the more incredible. Coupled with the fact that we didn't have to have a deal like this, a soft Brexit, keeping the UK in the single market and the customs union could have been pursued, but it was pushed firmly off the agenda by both the ERG and the DUP. The loss of frictionless trade was a fait accompli as a result of this action. With the UK then set on course to a hard Brexit, as reflected in this very short trade deal, the protocol was inevitable. It's not ideal. On the contrary, it's the least worst outcome, but I've yet to hear any viable alternatives, just fantasy, unicorn solutions. To those who say the border should be on the island of Ireland as opposed to the Irish Sea, just pick up an atlas and have a look at the amount of border crossings. Rather than acting as a hurler on the ditch, Alliance, led by our Brexit spokesperson, Deputy Leader Dr Stephen Farring, has been actively seeking ways to mitigate the impact and secure maximum possible flexibilities with regards to the protocol. The derogations and grace periods secured to date are to be welcomed, and it remains an absolute scandal that the UK Government failed to request the extension to the transition period as businesses struggled to adapt to the new rules, many of which were only published just a few days ago. All this in the context of the economic carnage caused by the pandemic. We aren't ready for the changes coming about on the 1st of January, and the blame lands firmly and squarely at 10 Downing Street, and not those fighting to earn a living wage and put bread on the table. I recognise the arguments put forward by Dr Aiken concerning invoking Article 16. The stark reality is the threshold has not been met for invoking that article. The fact that the window for scrutiny of this deal has been made deliberately narrow, and we're sitting here on the 30th of December scrutinising it. I just asked more reasons why it should be opposed. A quick review of the details concerning the deal, however, does make real concerns, with more and more being expressed as people get to examine the detail. Services, as my colleague Stuart Dixon outlined, are excluded. Future participation in Erasmus is ruled out. An alternative programme, known as the Turing Scheme, is now offered, which to me does an injustice to the Alan Turing's life and legacy. I thank the Irish Government for their commitment in terms of future participation of Northern Irish students in Erasmus, helping to ameliorate some of the aspects of the deal, but overall it's a bad deal for Northern Ireland, with Northern Ireland left certain to be shortchanged when it comes to the Shared Prosperity Fund and other funding due to replace EU programmes. If anything, this deal looks like a relatively short agreement to remarry after our divorce on the 31st of January this year, but with extensive prenuptials based upon real fears that one party, namely the UK, will diverge, especially since it's already been spotted window shopping talking about divergence. Time will tell whether this new marriage will work. I fear not. The best marriage is a future within the EU. We will, however, however, got to make this relationship go because it's the only deal that we have presented to us. But I will not be hesitant in the future in turning back and saying, I told you so.
Okay, members, and I call Claire Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And of course, a deal is better than no deal. But let's stop fooling ourselves that Brexit holds benefits for Northern Ireland, for its businesses or for its people. Let's remind ourselves that Northern Ireland, like Scotland, voted against Brexit, and that we should not be relieved that a bad deal for Northern Ireland has been done, or that we have been given a choice between bad and really bad, because bad is bad is bad, Mr. Speaker. And there is little in this future relationship bill that will lessen, for example, the Irish Sea border, and no one here thinks that that's a good thing. Boris Johnson wanted a hard Brexit, and it seems that this is as close as he could get. While there has been much lauding that a deal has been reached, it would be wise to remind ourselves that Prime Minister Johnson has a long record, as has been mentioned by Mrs Mallon, of U-turns, of lies, and, of course, seems to have no issue in threatening to break international law, as was supported and announced by our very own Secretary of State, Brandon Lewis. So time will tell, really, what the commitment to this deal is. For this current government cannot be trusted, and some here know that better than others. For the duration of this Brexit process, we've been given no proper scrutiny time, no proper access to relevant papers. We've had SIs, SRs, LCMs all being rushed through without full understanding of their impacts. So I'm somewhat relieved that here today, the recall of this assembly is simply to debate a non-binding motion and not to vote anything through. Since this deal was done less than a week ago and contains massive changes for people's lives and business, and that is our job, that we fully scrutinise and fully understand exactly what we're being told to do. And Brexit is being done to us, for we have no power in this process, no inclusion in the negotiating teams, and neither has the Irish Government. We've all been passengers. This has been an EU-UK government process, and every devolved region have been no more than influencers or concern raisers. But I want to focus on people and changes that are going to be brought about to them by this bill come Friday. Some of the changes to people's lives that will come into effect on Friday brought about. Some have been mentioned. For example, from Friday, all Northern Ireland University students can still access Erasmus Plus programmes. It's just that now the Irish Government will facilitate that and not the UK Government, who are their actual government. But British students, they're going to need a visa and potentially face hefty increases in university fees. And roaming charges, Mr. Speaker, as has been mentioned, well, they're back. and that will cause so much daily frustration to those living anywhere near close to border regions, and of course the price caps have gone with that. And what if you need medical assistance in the EU? Well, Irish passport holders will see no change, really, but British passport holders, well, the UK government have actually recommended that you go and get yourself comprehensive insurance once your current health certificate expires. That's despite this new global health card system coming. But all Irish citizens will retain free movement rights, and that will extend to any children and spouses, but British citizens won't. So in practice, we can actually still travel freely, buy as much duty-free as we can, come home via Dublin, and all will be well. So should we be advising all our citizens to get themselves an Irish passport if they haven't done so already? Because I know that I have signed many, many applications. But of course, remind them to don't forget your green card if you're taking your car with you to cross the border or enter Europe with a UK registration. And your pet's passport will still be valid, so feel free to bring the dog. Mr. Speaker, the Green Party have never supported Brexit. We absolutely acknowledge that it is here, it is happening, and the momentous changes start now. And there are indeed opportunities to be had in the times ahead, because radical change is needed if we are to mitigate against the climate and biodiversity crisis upon us, as well as Brexit. But do we have the leadership? Do we have the imagination? And do we have the will to do right, to secure a future relationship and build the new systems needed? Thank you.
Thank you. And I call Jim Allister.
Thank you. Friday on the 1st of January. It will be 220 years on that date from the activation of the Act of Union. Article 6 of that Act of Union was a fundamental building block, a foundation of this union. And it was to the effect that across and within the entirety of the United Kingdom, there would be free and frictionless trade from which every citizen could benefit. Sadly, on this 1st of January, coming on Friday, Article 6 of the Act of Union will be trashed by the protocol, which creates friction in trade within the United Kingdom, which causes an Irish Sea border to aid that friction. And of course, which brings with it the odious imposition of laws which we never made, which we cannot change, and which will be supervised by a foreign court in a foreign jurisdiction. Make no mistake about it, the protocol is a dire consequence for every citizen in Northern Ireland. We will all live through those dire consequences. And so we do have to ask the question, how did it arise? Well, the truth is, it arose because nationalism, aided by their little helpers in the Alliance Party, and some useful idiots in commerce, so balked at the very thought of an extra camera on the land border that they pushed the border to the Irish Sea. And some, Mr. Beattie used the word, now salivate at the consequence. They don't care about the consequence for the people of Northern Ireland. They see it rather as an advance towards partitioning the United Kingdom and unifying the island of Ireland economically. That is why they salivate. But it's the people of Northern Ireland who will suffer immensely in the consequence of that. Yes?
Mr Alistair, for giving way. Earlier in the debate, we were told what the collective noun for turkeys is. I looked it up. Apparently, the collective noun for hypocrites is a congregation.
Member has an additional minute.
Well, I think that says it all. And that congregation will be those who will wring their hands, who will lament and pretend that they are upset that their citizens can't readily access goods, be it through Google or any of the other suppliers, or that their companies cannot readily import. They will say how terrible, but they are the originators. It is they in this House who egged it on, who had to see it done, and who now impose that price upon us all. My other sadness about this is that the DUP, a party that knows these issues, though the Irish Sea border is the product of the betrayal of Brexit. And let me say, this is not the Brexit I voted for. It did not say on my ballot paper, do you want GB to leave the EU and leave Northern Ireland behind, abandoned in the EU's customs union, in its single market, in its VAT regime? No, it invited me to vote to leave as we joined, as one nation. One of my great sadnesses is that it is a DUP minister, though the Irish Sea border has been delivered by the betrayal of Brexit, that is building the infrastructure. And though the DUP in principle correctly today in Westminster will vote against this deal, in this House they've been voting to implement the protocol. And I do say to the DUP very directly, there is a huge onus upon you to ensure that the ambition of this protocol of building an all-Ireland economy is thwarted at every turn. You've heard it today, that's the ambition. Self-evident, it always was the price for Europe to sacrifice Northern Ireland. As the lead party of unionism in government, the burden upon you is immense to make sure that at every turn, in every small and every large measure,
Members, time's up.
You utterly thwart the building of an all-Ireland economy, because you know and I know what the next step is.
Thank you, and I call Jerry Carroll.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'll be breaking from some convention in this debate today, and I'll be not quoting Winston Churchill. He was an imperial butcher who believed the British Empire was superior to people here and those that the Empire colonised across the world. Mr Speaker, Boris Johnson's reactionary and calamitous Tory government is presiding over what is the worst crisis in living memory for working class people collectively across these islands. Their disastrous handling of Brexit is one element of it, but of course Brexit now dangerously intersects with the COVID health crisis, economic ruin, job losses and a deep social crisis that Britain and Ireland are now deeply in the throes of. Over the past 48 hours, Britain has had more new cases of COVID-19 than France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Poland, Portugal and the south of Ireland combined. And it has been horrific to watch as cases locally have multiplied and deaths have increased yet again. And our thoughts are obviously with everybody affected by it. And it is astounding to me that people are coping at all, our healthcare staff included. A winter like no other and a year like no other for far too many unfortunate people. The prospect, Mr Speaker, of a no-deal Brexit during this pandemic was clearly deeply troubling for many. And no doubt many have breathed a sigh of relief now in recent days. But the trade deal currently being debated at Westminster by a government made up of posh, rich Tory MPs is not a good deal for working class people here in Ireland or across the water, and may well give us cause to be troubled in the near future. I think we in this Assembly should use this opportunity to collectively reject this deal. And as per usual, Boris Johnson approached the announcement of a trade deal on Christmas Eve with much bluff and bluster, presenting it as a good deal. But the truth is far from that. No gains will be made for working class people under this Tory Brexit, and is not a ringing commitment to a fairer and more equal society that we so desperately need. The details of many areas of the deal remain unclear as the vote swiftly approaches today, and parts are yet to be fully negotiated and settled. Yet the Tories' commitment to pay cuts and further austerity measures speaks volumes of what we can expect in the coming year. The Tory vision of exiting the EU was a fantasy vision to bolster the British Empire, Mr Speaker, and they were happy to use racism in order to advance it, and even happier to throw their would-be allies in the DUP under the bus while they were at it. And the new immigration system at the heart of the Tories' post-Brexit plans, elements of which was put forward in this House just a few weeks ago, will restrict the free movement of people and begin the process of a racist points-based immigration system. I want to strongly, Mr Speaker, reiterate my opposition to this again as we sit on the precipice of a likely deal in Westminster. Mr Speaker, the entire Brexit process has exacerbated the deep crisis at the heart of the British state, a reactionary state based on militarism, austerity and inequality, a state that continues to deny justice to the victims of its actions on this island and indeed on its own island, people in Grenfell Tower in particular, whose rotten record of austerity over the past decade is enough to illustrate the nefarious role of Britain in Ireland. And I believe that progressives and radicals in Ireland should use the current context of crisis and instability within British capitalism to rid ourselves of the Tories once and for all. We should recognise what moves have been made to prevent a hardening of the border in Ireland. But it should only be the beginning. Historically, the border has divided people on this island, holding back progress on this island and helping to bolster two conservative states, two conservative right-wing states, north and south. And for these reasons, we have always opposed the border, and today we repeat our call for a border poll. I had submitted an amendment to today's debate to outright oppose Boris Johnson's deal, the call for a border poll and endorse cross-border action on a range of political issues. However, it appears that only amendments from the executive parties were deemed acceptable.
Order, member. Could I ask the member to resume your seat? I want to strongly advise you. I know you don't have much good to say about this institution, and that's fair enough. That's entirely your opinion and perhaps your mandate. But you're here long enough to know the rules. Do not be questioning the Speaker's intention or motivation for accepting or rejecting amendments. Your amendment was dealt with the same integrity as every other amendment was dealt with. So I advise you strongly not to recommence that discussion.
Okay, Mr Speaker, I've just mentioned that my amendment wasn't selected. I wasn't casting judgment on you.
You were, so I'm not taking any more discussion on it, so just depart from it altogether.
I'll just bring my comments to a conclusion. I certainly I want to speak in support of amendment number 4. I certainly wouldn't agree with everything in the amendment in the name of Matthew O'Toole and Nick Mullen. And I'm on record detailing why I'm no friend of the neoliberal heart of the EU. But this amendment is the only opportunity today for us to send a message to Boris Johnson and Westminster that we have no truck with this deal, as other devolved institutions have the opportunity to do so. So therefore, I will critically support Amendment 4 today. And in the aftermath of a Tory Brexit, our immediate primary aim will be should be stand up for working class people on these islands. Thank you.
I call Roy Beggs.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to support Amendment number 2 in the name of Steve Aiken, and I also can indicate my support for Amendment number 3. Today is a day of mixed emotions for me. It's a day where I'm very proud to be part of the United Kingdom, a day when the new Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine has been approved by the United Kingdom Government, who have already purchased 100 million doses of the vaccine, which can help to protect me, my family, and indeed everyone in the United Kingdom and in Northern Ireland. And this will also be very beneficial to the Third World, given that it was developed in a not-for-profit basis. But it's also a very, very sad day for me, because with today, the Labour Party has already indicated that they will be supporting the UK-EU trade and cooperation agreement at Westminster, so it is certain to go through. And when it is passed, it will cement in place the Northern Ireland Protocol. I find the Northern Ireland Protocol offensive as a democratic representative. I find it offensive as a unionist. I find it offensive as it breaches the Belfast Agreement of Consent that unionists and nationalists should agree to or any change in our constitutional position. Our position within the UK has changed. As of the 1st of January, there will be a border down the Irish Sea. No one can argue that the constitutional position of Northern Ireland within the United Kingdom will then be different. And it's for that reason I am very, very sore. Already, as a member of the Assembly's Infrastructure Committee, we've gained advice that we should not have actually discussed and approved an SLR, a statutory rule. And because it is to be the fiefdom of the new joint committee, which will be governing all of us in many aspects of our lives. And in particular, I understand the chairman and the vice chairman of the joint committee have to agree, and once that's done, guess what? It becomes law and regulation in Northern Ireland. Who wants to live under such a regime? It is undemocratic. Ultimately, also, we will, unlike the rest of the UK, continue to be ruled by the European Court of Justice in many, many issues. The Ulster Unionist parties warned other unionists, privately and publicly, about the dangers of even discussing or acquiescing to a border down the Irish Sea. Sadly, we were ignored. Boris Johnson took that door ajar and he pushed it open, and he forced into his agreement something which suited him, something which I think all unions subsequently realised was a mistake to have acquiesced to, and we now have this border down the Irish Sea. I will.
Mr. Alistair is no longer in his place, but I just wanted, in light of what you're saying as well, we've heard an earlier reference there, rather insulting in my opinion, to useful idiots. We're discussing this politically today in the context of politics. This has been a debate and a discussion right across our society. And people who are involved in farming, in agriculture, in business, in community development are entitled and were entitled to take part in that debate, and they have expressed their significant concern, and that's why the protocol is necessary. And the protocol is a result of Brexit.
Member has an extra minute.
I've highlighted that it is a clear breach of the Belfast Agreement. There is not unionist consent for it, and there's been a failure of nationalism and of the EU and of the British government and the Republic of Ireland government to recognise that. I just wish that everyone would. But we had warned about the dangers of this protocol, which is now about to be enacted as of the 1st of January. As my colleague Doug Beattie indicated, it is sad that some unionists' DNA is on that border down the Irish Sea. It's a sad fact that my own East Antrim MP followed the lead of English nationalism and is still trying to justify his unjustifiable actions where he gambled the union and which has resulted in this border down the Irish Sea. So what does it actually mean? It will result in extra paperwork and bureaucracy when we move goods across the Irish Sea. Time is money. It also takes time to complete that paperwork. And ultimately, this will result in additional costs to you and I and everyone in Northern Ireland as consumers. We will all have to pay more. Already I've learnt of one businessman who sought to get quotes for moving pallets next month, and he's been charged £100 per pallet surcharge. Guess what? We're all going to have to pay for it. I'm aware of another constituent who ordered a phone over EE, and it's already a number of days late. And he went to track it, discovered it's being delivered by DPD. Of course, they're not delivering to Northern Ireland at present, unless that's changed in recent times. A number of delivery companies have indicated they're not delivering here because of concern that it may breach some of the protocol and the bureaucracy, which is really yet to embed. So guess what? Someone else will have to deliver it. No doubt they'll charge extra for it, something we all will have to pay. Movement of animals across the Irish Sea. Already, I'm aware that guide dogs for the blind are an area of concern where passports will be needed. to move dogs about, perhaps veterinary inspections, even more expensive to get
Members,
back
time's
here.
up.
It's important that we all work together and try and mitigate against these costs, use the regulations that are in it,
Members, time's
Section
up.
16, to try and make a better place for us all to live and do business.
Thank you, and I call John Blair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will state at the outset my membership of the Northern Ireland Policing Board, as I'm likely to refer to policing-related matters later in the speech. But I will start by reflecting that the challenging time frame of just 1 year to negotiate a comprehensive free trade agreement was almost impossible from the outset, and made worse, of course, by the coronavirus pandemic. The UK Government, the devolved Assembly and the EU have rightly diverted their focus and resources into dealing with the crisis, leaving an extensive list of questions surrounding Brexit unanswered and insufficient time to extensively scrutinise any deal. As Alliance colleagues before me have said today, the UK-EU trade deal does avoid a catastrophic no-deal situation, but it is difficult to be enthusiastic around any deal that disregards the majority Remain vote in Northern Ireland and puts us in a more distant relationship with the EU than before. Northern Ireland will face consequences and loss of opportunities, no matter the details of the deal agreed between the UK and the EU. There is no such thing, it's been said already, as a good deal. All versions of Brexit will leave Northern Ireland in a worse situation than before and will see the loss of a broad range of opportunities and benefits, including the loss of freedom of movement and impact on the service economy. Mr. Speaker, no one should underestimate the importance of the loss of some of the European freedoms to some of us in this chamber. However, a UK-EU future relationship agreement is necessary to avoid that catastrophic no-deal outcome. While Northern Ireland does have some protection and even some comparative advantage due to the protocol, it is workable only in the context of a wider deal. A no-deal would have created a broad range of major economic and other challenges for our region, alongside the knock-on consequences of wider disruption in Great Britain. Turning to those policing matters, Mr. Speaker, on matters related to that and security, as I previously indicated I want to say that it's probably fair to reflect that the deal, if initial reading is correct, achieves a little more than had been feared. There are, however, remaining and serious concerns, such as future arrangements around the European arrest warrant, that there is a very tight time frame involved in trying to fix data management arrangements within a 6-month time frame. The reality that readjustment, process realignment and changes on this scale are likely to have a significant impact on policing capacity and resources. Notwithstanding this deal, Alliance remains strongly pro-European and was never prepared to give legitimacy or acquiescence to a hard Brexit. We will continue to advocate the closest possible relationship for Northern Ireland with the EU and to seek further flexibilities and mitigations regarding the implementation of the protocol. With colleagues and fellow Irish and Northern Irish and UK Europeans, we will in the times ahead explore all opportunities to rejoin the EU and to campaign for this. Until then, Mr. Speaker, the situation and all that it brings must be owned by those who supported Brexit, campaigned for Brexit and campaigned on behalf of others for Brexit. Today, with colleagues, I'll be supporting Amendments 1 and 4, but opposing 2 and 3.
Thank you. We now move to the wines on the amendments, and I call Matthew O'Toole to wind on Amendment number 4.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to wind on SDLP Amendment number 4. In addition, I would indicate our broad support for number 3, but ask colleagues to reflect on whether Amendment number 4 offers slightly more weight to opposition to this specific deal. But we do support the broad intent of both amendments. Mr. Speaker, a lot can happen in 4.5 years. Since mid-2016, the United States has elected and thankfully subsequently rejected Donald Trump. As we know, it took a little more than 3/4 of this year for researchers to come up with a series of vaccines to combat the novel coronavirus. This year, Liverpool have even won the league for the first time in 3 decades. But for the past 4.5 years, the UK has been spending its time constructing a relationship with the European Union that will make it poorer, less influential and markedly less safe. Mr. Speaker, it is the greatest single act of self-harm in the history of modern states. In pursuit of an impossible perfection of sovereignty in an age when countries are interdependent and challenges do not recognise borders, challenges such as COVID-19, the UK has devoted more than half a decade to agreeing an inferior relationship with the EU, the one set out in the 1,200-page document that MPs and MLAs are debating today. It was called, Mr Speaker, taking back control. If gathering your Parliament on New Year's Eve to force through a 1,000-page trade deal with barely any scrutiny is taking back control and giving to your Parliament, my God, I don't know what we had before. Yes, Mr Speaker, people voted for this. A majority in England voted for this, but not in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland voted Remain, and at every subsequent election we have reasserted our preference for EU membership, or at the very least a closer relationship with the EU than the UK has sought in this agreement. Thankfully, we have some of the protections in the Ireland Protocol, which, as others have said, is far from perfect, but essential with the EU pursuing such a divergent relationship with the UK, pursuing such a divergent relationship with the EU. But, Mr Speaker, the Protocol only covers trade and goods. There will be marked disruption to our economy and our lives as a result of this deal and what isn't covered by the Protocol. Just let me take a few examples. This deal barely touches on services, which is the majority of our economy. As of Saturday, we will have fewer guarantees on how legal advice, engineering projects or digital marketing can be provided across the border. The legal ban on roaming charges will be gone. Mr Speaker, I wrote the press release in my old job warning in 2016 about how roaming charges could be at risk, so I know of what I speak. Roaming charges the legal ban on roaming charges will be gone, leaving mobile phone operators free to impose charges as they wish. And as people in Warren Point and Strabane know, you don't necessarily even have to cross the border to accidentally roam. There are few guarantees at all on financial services, where we simply have to wait for the EU to decide how much equivalence UK financial services providers will have. And this isn't just about the derivatives market in the City of London. This could have real-world consequences for our banking sector, where most of the biggest financial institutions have always been cross-border. And on law enforcement, Mr Speaker, this deal is certainly better than no deal, but it will make cross-border law enforcement, including extradition, as members including Doug Beattie have acknowledged, slower and more cumbersome. This is a bad deal for everyone in the UK and everyone in Northern Ireland. One of the greatest mysteries of all is why those in this chamber who claim to be the greatest supporters of the UK have been the greatest cheerleaders for a project that all economic forecasters say will make the UK poorer and less influential. It wasn't Irish nationalists or Remainers who did that. It was the DUP, a party which had the opportunity, the power to deliver a better outcome for everyone, including Northern Ireland, but chose instead to court the approval of fanatical Brexiteers and Tory chancellors who let them and us down. Mr Speaker, tomorrow is not Christmas Eve but New Year's Eve, but I suspect that for some members of the DUP they may get a visit from three ghosts. I wouldn't want to speculate about the New Year's past, present or future they will be arguing for, but I hope the DUP on New Year's Day wake up and have a slightly different attitude to that they've had over the past 3 or 4 years. Mr Speaker, Brexit was always particularly awful for this part of the world. Our society was uniquely exposed to the risks, and we are the hinge point of the relationship between the UK and EU. We weren't properly considered either in the run-up to the referendum or in the aftermath, and take it from me, because I was there. That's why the SDLP is moving today's amendment, and that's why we oppose, both in Westminster and here, this deal. People in Northern Ireland, whatever your background, whatever your constitutional perspective, deserve so much better than this. That's why this Assembly should send a clear message today that we do not consent to the terms of the Brexit being imposed on us by Boris Johnson and his ideologues. While we are immensely grateful to those in the EU, particularly Michel Barnier and his team, for seeking to protect our interests, we cannot consent to what's happening today. I commend our amendment to the Assembly. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, and I call Christopher Stalford to wind on amendment number 3.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Just as others have quoted Churchill, I'm afraid... Mr Carroll's back. Excellent, because I'm going to ruin his Wednesday by quoting Margaret Thatcher at him. In 1988, in the Bruges speech, Margaret Thatcher said, "We have not successfully rolled back the frontiers of the state, only to see them reimposed at a European level." Unfortunately, this deal does that. It reimposes bureaucracy upon us, and it reimposes the frontiers of the state. I don't think that it's fair to say that only one party or two parties in this chamber are responsible for this, because there are 3 parties who have spent the last 4 years demanding these provisions, demanding a border up the Irish Sea in order to prevent checks on the land. So the Alliance, the SDLP and Sinn Féin own the provisions of this protocol. We all remember the trips off to Brussels, in and out of Barnier's office. Oh, we're campaigning, we're lobbying. You campaigned for this, you delivered it, you own it, not us. I believe fundamentally that the case for leaving the European Union is a sound one. I'm a good European, and that's why I believe in independent, sovereign, self-governing states responsible for their own money, their own laws, and how they run their own countries. The concept of being European is a lot older than a failing supranational structure like the European Union. When we joined the European Union in 1972, and it was reaffirmed then in 1975, when we joined the European Union, it accounted for almost 30% of world trade. Today that figure is less than half. The European Union is not some halcyon, or not some miracle cure for our economic ills. It's a declining market. Our future lies in expanding markets and improving trade with the rest of the world. The provisions in this protocol are not helpful to local business, and that has been acknowledged. And it is a source of profound regret to me that it is the Conservative and Unionist Party that is bringing these provisions in. I think the hypocrisy that has been demonstrated by some contributions is quite remarkable. To be lectured about British exceptionalism by a party whose name literally translates as ourselves alone is remarkable. To be accused of engaging in British exceptionalism from that source is just incredible. I thought it was interesting in one of the contributions that, and I raised this, Irish, Scottish and Welsh were referred to, but people like me, British in Northern Ireland, were excluded. And I think that is demonstrative of a mindset that we have seen over recent days. I am British. Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom, and I will do everything in my power to make it that way. My aspirations are just as legitimate as those across the way, whether they consider themselves to be nationalist, European, Irish, whatever. And I will not have the community that I come from and our aspirations delegitimised, as has been attempted during this debate. We are British, and we want Northern Ireland to stay within the United Kingdom. I want to say to the Prime Minister, we do not, and we will not, consent to the provisions of this protocol, because it damages the integrity of the United Kingdom. And therefore, he should be in no doubt that what he has done is wrong. Wrong for any unionist, so-called, to endorse these provisions. I think it's interesting as well, sir. I won't get an extra minute, so I'm sorry. I think it's interesting as well, and the member didn't give way to me when I asked her. I think it's interesting, sir, to note that the consent protections that were initially envisaged in this have been removed. And at whose behest were they removed? The consent protections, whereby this Assembly would have had a direct say on the operation of this protocol. At whose request were they moved? The Alliance, Sinn Féin and the SDLP. So the principle of dual consent applies only when it runs contrary to unionist positions, but not in other circumstances. I think that people can see the opportunism and the cynicism at the heart of that position. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, and I call Mike Nesbitt to wind on amendment number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't intend to rehearse the contributions of speakers, given there are so many whines. What I would like to do is focus on the impact of the trade and cooperation agreement on a particular industry, the fishing industry, decimated over the decades that we were bound by the common fisheries policy, which is why they believed they would be the poster boys of Brexit, quickly and clearly seen to prosper, having left the European Union. That industry's reaction is summarised in this briefing document as the two representative bodies come together in an unprecedented manner as the Fishermen's Federation. I commend the document to the House, not least the asks they make of us, and particularly how the 100 million Boris Johnson has promised for revitalising the UK fishing fleet is distributed, because they make the argument it must not be distributed via the Barnett formula, because if that happens, all we'll be able to afford is a new boat. Maybe a big boat, but just a boat, while it takes 20 to 40 million pounds to modernise a port like Portavogie. So we must think carefully and lobby on that front. Now, reading that document, I wondered this. If the fishermen knew back in June 2016 what they know today, that it would take 4.5 years to get a deal, and the biggest promise in that deal is if you only wait another 5.5 years, you can hold on to the forlorn promise that we will actually finally take back control of our waters, would they actually have voted to leave? Not when the document states, and I quote, "The Northern Ireland fishing industry had been led to believe it would be much better off." We are not. End of quote. So let us acknowledge their hurt, but also listen to their positive asks for making the most of a bad deal. In 2016, my party published a vision for Northern Ireland outside of the EU, and we brought the framework strategy to this House to a debate which we lost. And I regret that, because in this debate I haven't heard one person who is anything other than unhappy with where we are today. So what went wrong? Well, on one level, I think it went wrong because nobody thought Brexit through. The party to my left simply seemed to think that Brexit was the cure for all our problems, just as their partners in Stormont Castle seem to believe that a united Ireland is the panacea and the Holy Grail. Neither's right. The other issue is that Brexit is actually a long-term strategy, but those delivering Brexit are short-term tacticians, the Prime Minister and, sadly, the DUP. On the 9th of June in 2017, the DUP found themselves holding the balance of power at Westminster. What was their price for propping up the government? It was tactical, £1 billion for public services. It could have been strategic. They could have had locked-in guarantees about the outworkings of Brexit and the implications for Northern Ireland. Today, wouldn't you swap that £1 billion for a better Brexit? Wouldn't that be a better long-term solution for Northern Ireland? Mr. Speaker, the First Minister asked me to give way. My response is to quote the First Minister back at her. No. I did not support Brexit. I never sensed it would deliver what the Brexiteers promised us. We have not taken back control. We did not leave as one. And we are now a place apart within the United Kingdom. On the 9th of August 1974, Richard Nixon resigned as the 37th President of the United States. His tactic to try and excuse away the criminality of Watergate was to go for what he called plausible deniability. Mr. Speaker, I sense the DUP are trying the same thing. I know that the First Minister said that the party was consistent in opposition to the protocol, but on the 2nd of October last, she called it a serious and sensible way forward. I also note she said it has been imposed upon us. Well, now she knows how the 52% of us who voted Remain feel about Brexit. Plausible deniability, Mr. Speaker, did not work for Richard Nixon, and it will not work for the DUP. I commend Amendment 2.
Okay, thank you. And let's have some order, please. And I call John O'Dowd to wind on Amendment number 1.
An interesting debate, perhaps summed up by Mr Nesbitt at the end in relation to plausible deniability, because as I listened to debates and contributions from particularly the DUP benches, I was trying to figure out what exactly they were trying to state or sell or promote, because at one stage the deal was bad and then the deal was good, but the bad parts of the deal are to blame for the protocol, and Brexit had really nothing to do with it. When Brexit has everything to do with it, because you own it all. Those who promoted Brexit those who promised a new beginning after Brexit and sat in kitchens with farmers and told them that they would get rid of all this European red tape, that their profits would soar, that they'd be selling meat and products around the world, and there would be fewer regulations, own Brexit and own the fact that those farmers are now going to be less well off than they were before Brexit. When they told businesses that they would get rid of the red tape and their products would be sold in free trade deals around the world, are responsible for them businesses now being less well off. So you own it all. In 2016, for whatever reason, when the DUP decided to support Brexit, you've made a fundamental economic, political error. And Brexit was the backdrop to the collapse of the Assembly later that year. And I remember in April 2017, when there was negotiations going on in Stormont Castle to restore the Assembly and the Executive, which were at quite an advanced stage, I have to say. And there was huge potential for agreement there. Theresa May called her election. The election took place, and the DUP hooked up with the Tory party. Now, I hear a lot from the opposite benches about consent, about the feelings of unionism, about Britishness, and I recognise Christopher Stafford's Britishness. I support and recognise his right to be British. I don't support his right, or I don't support his position in relation to the Union, but I support his right to be British. But when the DUP decided to hook up and take power with the Tories then, did they consider what impact that would have on nationalism and republicanism? I don't think they did. When they decided to support Brexit and become advocates of a hard Brexit, did they ever consider what impact that would have on nationalism and republicanism on the island of Ireland? I don't think they did. Quick one, yes.
I'm sure the member will agree with me that it's quite interesting to listen to the utterance about consent. I'm sure the DUP and UUP members all know full well that parallel consent applies to certain Assembly procedures. It's laid out in the Good Friday Agreement. It's not to do with constitutional issues, which will be decided by a simple majority.
I think they know full well those positions. And when the first Deputy First Minister, then Deputy First and Deputy First Minister, were attending the Joint Ministerial Council in European format, which was due to take place on a Thursday, and on the Tuesday, Theresa May made her famous speech where she said, "We will be leaving the single market and we will be leaving the customs union," and the DUP immediately supported it. Did they take into consideration then the impact on nationalism, republicanism on the island of Ireland? No, they didn't. At no stage during this process has the current leaders of political unionism, taken into consideration any of that. But here's the lesson for them. When they had their deal with the Tories, they were told that the Tories would sell them out, and the Tories did sell them out. Because the Tories sold them out because they didn't see them as their co-equals. They didn't see them as fellow Conservatives and Unionists. They seen them perhaps as Ulster men and Ulster women, or Irish people, but they certainly didn't see them as their co-equals. And the flaw in the Unionist strategy in this entire statement has been that you have not seen us, your neighbours, your political allies in this chamber, your political partners in the executive, as your co-equals. And you see, when you don't see somebody as your co-equal, you treat them lesser. And you don't treat them with respect. I haven't had time to give way to you. You do not treat them with respect. And the strategy of political unionism, for the 100 years this state has existed, has failed you.
Members, time's up.
So I would appeal to members opposite to start treating each other with respect, and then we will have a strategy which works for us all.
Thank you. Order, Mr. Storey. Order. I call the Deputy First Minister to conclude and wind on the debate on the motion, and the Deputy First Minister has 10 minutes.
And I want to offer my comments.
Deputy Minister, Mr. Storey, and I don't want to have to ask you again or rebuke you again. I mean, you spoke for a while this morning, and everybody gave you the respect during your entire contribution. Now, please offer the same to the last speaker. Thank you.
Can Corlea, and as I said, I want to speak with two hats, firstly as Deputy First Minister and then as Vice President of Sinn Féin. I think it's evident to state the fact that there's widespread differences across this House in relation to the decision to leave the EU. There has been, however, agreement that it was in no one's interest to leave the transition period at 11 p.m. on the 31st of December without having a deal in place. The Executive has been unified in its commitment to secure the best possible outcome for our communities, for businesses and for citizens. It's clear that an outcome in which we were required to trade under WTO terms would have been disastrous for our economy, but particularly for the agri-food industry, and many members have referred to the real-time implications for that industry. The conclusion of the negotiations and this agreement marks the end of one phase, but it certainly opens up the beginning of another. Since the referendum result back in June of 2016, this has been a particularly difficult road to travel. So whether or not you agree with the decision to leave the EU, it's now our responsibility as elected representatives to work together to ensure that the withdrawal agreement, including the protocol, and this future relationship agreement are implemented in a manner which protects our citizens, our businesses and our economy. Dealing with the challenges posed by the implementation of this agreement and that of the protocol is just one area in which citizens will look towards us to work together for the good of everyone. Therefore, it will be essential that we're represented appropriately and proportionately in the governance structures of both agreements as we move forward if the continued interaction between the agreement and the protocol are to be taken into account. As many members throughout the course of the debate have acknowledged, the lateness of both this agreement and of the joint committee decisions on the protocol present an enormous challenge for our businesses and for society in knowing exactly what they need to be prepared for. Development of clear guidance and communications will be vital in this next period to ensure that any impact is minimised. It is clear that this is a complex agreement and implementation will be a challenge and most likely be an evolving process. This agreement will be implemented and operate alongside the protocol, and there will be interactions between both which will need to be carefully monitored and make sure that there is no unintended consequences. We want to be equally clear now, as the then Deputy First Minister Martin McGuinness and First Minister set out in their letter to the then British Prime Minister Theresa May back in 2016, that it is critical to our economy that our businesses are able to retain their competitiveness both north-south and also east-west, that they do not incur additional costs which could lead to the relocation of businesses or increased costs for the consumer here. This agreement does not mark the end of our representations on this issue, but recognises this will be a continuing priority for the Executive in the weeks, months and years to come. Many members have today recognised the importance that the EU funds have had on our economy and the peace process. The Executive Office will be working closely with the Finance Minister to ensure that the British Government are fully aware of the importance of replacing these funds and that the new Shared Prosperity Fund will provide support to the many excellent projects that have benefited right across our communities. Members have picked up on a number of points which will require clarity. Roaming charges, for example, was raised, and a number of members have referred to that. And it is correct to say that surcharge-free roaming, when you travel to the EU and EEA countries, will no longer be guaranteed from the 1st of January. But we do understand that mobile operators have stated they have no current plans to change their mobile roaming policies, and we look very much to them in the time ahead in terms of that. People have raised rightly concerns around access to labour. Dr McAleer raised the issue of the fact that this is going to cause huge challenges for many industries, but not least the agri-food industry. And I think it is really disappointing to say that our needs have not been reflected in the Government's immigration policy. However, we will continue to press on these issues. The issue of SBS has been raised, and again, really disappointing that there wasn't a higher level of aspiration to achieve a better deal on SBS in the negotiations. So it's important again that we continue to engage through the governance structures. The issue of parcels, and many people have experienced over recent days the fact that they can't get parcels delivered. That's going to have implications for small businesses who rely on this as a way to secure goods and services. So I think that these are all huge issues which we have raised but will continue to raise. And I think all these things demonstrates that we are certainly at a turning point, and there is much more work to be done. I want to make some remarks then just as Vice President of Sinn Féin, and I think that the first thing to say is that for over 4 years now, we have regrettably been exposed to the worst kind of political discourse from Westminster, toxic political discourse actually from Westminster, and a Tory-inspired Brexit. The Tories that have no mandate and no regard for the interests of the people here and those of us that we all represent collectively in this chamber.
There is no good Brexit for the people of the island of Ireland, from whatever tradition or culture you may come from. Brexit has caused huge division, it's caused instability, and it's caused uncertainty, and it's caused fear. It has stretched British-Irish relations after almost 2 decades now of trying to renew that relationship between our two islands. For those of us who are opposed to Brexit, it has threatened those rights and entitlements that as EU citizens we benefit from and enjoy, and in many ways we probably have taken for granted. But for many throughout the course of this debacle, we have seen the enormous political and practical benefits that the 1998 Good Friday Agreement has brought in helping safeguard the citizens, businesses and society here from what would have been a much more catastrophic situation that we find ourselves in today. The 27 member states that make up the EU and the United States Congress recognised the value and the success of the Good Friday Agreement, and importantly, that our special and unique circumstances required a bespoke solution. They recognised that prior to the Good Friday Agreement, security checkpoints existed on the border between the north and south of Ireland, that the British Army military installations which have been built and reinforced— I'm going to just finish my point. They recognised that the British Army military installations which had been built and reinforced from the 1970s onwards were symbols of division and symbols of conflict. They recognised that the common travel area, full EU membership and the peace process combined have meant that for the past 22 years, both customs posts and immigration checkpoints on the Irish border had been demolished. They also recognised that people's daily lives in the border region have been transformed, and that the invisible border on the island of Ireland has become the greatest symbol of peace. Thankfully, our international allies recognise that any reversal of any of this would have had huge adverse economic, social and political and security impacts on both people in the border communities but also on the island as a whole. The pro-Remain parties in this Assembly have, with others, successfully defended the interests of citizens, workers, businesses and civic society by working together to protect peace, jobs, economic stability and people's livelihoods. And this is reflected in the Irish Protocol. The solution to avoid a hard border on the island of Ireland, protecting the All-Ireland economy and the GFA in all of its parts, giving us access to both the EU single market and the British internal market, and keeping the North aligned to the EU on regulations and standards. Having secured the protocol, which will be implemented in full and operational from the 1st of January 2021, nobody from whatever political quarter wanted us crashing out of the EU after the transition period ends tomorrow, with no terms of departure or future relationship with the EU, and literally over a cliff edge, coupled with the impacts of COVID on this society. So while the fine detail of the trade and cooperation agreement has to be carefully analysed, there will be a relief that a trade deal has now been agreed, and special arrangements have been secured for the island of Ireland, encapsulated in the Irish Protocol, and that will be implemented in full. There's also now a level of certainty for businesses, but much more work remains to be done in the weeks and months ahead by the British Government on traders' support. In the immediate term, we need to ensure that there is full support for those sectors which will struggle despite today's deal, and we need to look at how the North's voice can be heard at an EU level in the coming years. I must say that I am very open to discussing with others in this chamber the ways in which this could be facilitated, including through observer status within the European Union for this Assembly. Under the terms of the Good Friday Agreement, there is an inherent right for those born on this island to Irish citizenship, and by virtue of that right, citizenship to the European Union as well. Citizens who enjoy that right must be afforded the benefit of their citizenship. We know that at least 700,000 people born in the North now hold an Irish passport, and about 200,000 of those made their first application after the Brexit referendum. I welcome, therefore, the Irish Government's announcement that they will fund students from the North, whatever the passport they hold, to participate in the hugely popular and successful Erasmus programme. I have previously pressed the Government on this, and also funding the European Health Insurance Card scheme, which I expect to also be facilitated. This practical cooperation and collaboration on a north-south basis must continue, and indeed must be strengthened. And to conclude, Can Corlia, let me say to colleagues, this is not the end of the road. In fact, it's a turning point. It's a defining moment in the history of Ireland, and the future belongs to us all. I've described it as the decade of opportunity because the decisions that we take now will determine the future for another generation. I certainly want to see, and will work every day to see, that the all of Ireland is once again back within the European Union.
Thank you, Cora Maggot. Members, before I put the question on amendment number 1, I would remind members that if it is made, I will not be putting the question on amendments 2, 3 or 4. The question is that amendment number 1, standing in the names of John O'Dowd, Kiva Archibald, Colin Gilderdew and Declan McAleer, be made. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Clear lobbies. Clear lobbies. The House will divide. The motion will be put in 3 minutes. Thank you. Could I remind members to be careful with the social distancing in the chamber? Okay, members, please resume your seats. Okay, members. The question is that amendment number 1, standing in the names of John O'Dowd, Kiva Archibald, Colin Gilderdew and Declan McAleer, be made. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. No. Okay. Do we have tellers? Do we have tellers? Okay, members. Order, members. Tellers, members. Tellers as well as members. Tellers, we speak among ourselves. All right. Okay, members. Tellers have been appointed as follows. Tellers for the ayes are Declan McAleer and Keith Archibald. Tellers for the noes are Paul Gibbon and Christopher Stafford. Members already are aware of all the protocols around proxy voting and so on. Understand Order 112. Also remind members to ensure that social distancing continues to be observed while the division is taking place. And please be patient at all times and follow the instructions of the lobby clerks. Clear lobbies. The Assembly will divide. Ayes to my right, noes to my left. Secure the doors, please. Thank you. Okay, members, we'll resume our seats. Yes. Thank you. Clerk, please read the result.
64 members voted, 26 members voted aye, 38 members voted no. 22 members who voted in both lobbies are not included in these results. The amendment therefore falls.
And the amendment falls, members. And the question is that amendment number 2, standing in the name of Steve Aiken, be made. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Okay, members, order. I've been advised by the parties that in accordance with Standing Order 113 that there is agreement that we can dispense with the 3 minutes and move straight to the division. So I now call for tellers. Do we have tellers? Just unfasten the doors, please. Okay, members, tellers have been appointed as follows. Tellers for the ayes are Steve Aiken and Paul Given. Tellers for the noes, Declan McAleer and Sinead McLaughlin. Again, can I remind all members to follow the instructions of the lobby clerks and to respect the need for social distancing. Clear the lobbies, the Assembly will divide. Ayes to my right, noes to my left. Secure the doors, please. Okay, members. All resume your seats, please. Yep. Clerk, please read the result.
87 members voted, 38 members voted aye, 49 members voted no. The amendment therefore falls.
The amendment falls. And unfasten the doors. We'll take a pause for a moment to make sure all members are back in again. Move on, yeah. Okay, members, the question is in amendment number 3, standing in the name of Paul Given, Gary Middleton, Christopher Stalford and Mervyn Story be made. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Okay. Do we have tellers? Okay, members. Order in the chamber, please. Members, tellers have been appointed as follows. Tellers for the ayes are Steve Aiken and Paul Given. Tellers for the noes are Declan McAleer and Sinead McLaughlin. Again, I would like to remind all members to follow the instructions of the lobby clerks and to respect the need for social distancing. Clear the lobbies. Assembly will divide. Ayes to my right, noes to my left. Secure the doors, please. Okay, members. Clerk, please read the result.
37 members voted aye, 49 members voted no. The amendment therefore falls.
Amendment is not made. And unfasten the doors, please. We'll pause for a moment to see if there are any members needing to come back into the chamber. Do we have tellers? Sorry, I'm ahead of myself again. Okay. The question is that amendment number 4, standing in the name of Nicola Mallon and Matthew O'Toole, be made. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. No. Okay. Do we have tellers? Okay, members, tellers have been appointed as follows. Tellers for the ayes, Andrew Muir and Sinead McLaughlin. Tellers for the noes, Paul Given and Steve Egan. Clear lobbies. The Assembly will divide. Ayes to my right, noes to my left. Secure the doors, please. Okay, members. Okay, members. Clerk, please read the result.
87 members voted, 49 members voted aye, 38 members voted no. The amendment is therefore agreed.
Amendment is agreed. Unfasten the doors. Point of order.
Thank you. On a point of order, Mr Speaker, the Northern Ireland Assembly has declined to give consent again to Brexit and to this Tory government's inferior trade deal. Can I ask that you now write to the Common Speaker and to the Prime Minister to convey immediately the view of this Assembly?
I thank the member for that point of order. Not really a point of order as such, but that will be done. That was my intention to do that, to convey the results of the discussion today to the relevant authorities. Okay. Unfasten the doors. We'll just pause for a moment or two then to put the final motion tonight. Okay. The question is that the motion is amended be agreed. All those in favour say aye. The contrary, no. No. Do we have tellers? Do we have any tellers? Okay, members. Tellers have been appointed as follows. Tellers for the ayes, Andrew Muir and Sinead McLaughlin. Tellers for the noes, Paul Given and Steve Aiken. Clear the lobbies. Assembly will divide. Ayes to my right and noes to my left. Secure doors, please. Okay, members. Clerk, please read the result.
85 members voted, 47 members voted aye, 38 members voted no. The motion is carried.
The motion is amended, therefore is carried. Unfasten the doors, please. Sit in. Members, before I move to the final item on the agenda, I just want to thank all the members of our staff who have been working this last number of days to prepare for today's proceedings, and particularly those members of the Business Office and the Speaker's Office who have been doing a lot of the unseen work liaising with the various parties and the members tabling the motions and amendments and so on. So I just want to pay a special thank you to all the staff who have helped to facilitate the debates today, particularly since it's on their leave, and we tried to promise them last year or before Christmas that we would let them have their leave. So I leave that thought with yourselves at the moment. But I want to thank all the members for their contribution today. I think it was a very healthy debate and a very mature debate. Reflects very well on the level of complexity on the issues debated, but also on the manner in which members were able to conduct and navigate through those difficulties in terms of the building public confidence. Item 3 on the order paper is the adjournment. Before I put the question, I remind members that the Business Committee has agreed that the Assembly should meet in plenary session again tomorrow and will commence at 11 a.m. The question is that the Assembly do now adjourn. The Assembly is adjourned. Thank you all.
Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly plenary programme signed.